Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for Tuesday, April 25th, 2023. If anyone has a cell phone, could they just put it on mute? And our first item is Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone could please rise and salute the flag.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have a regular meeting tonight, no public hearings. So our first item on our agenda is public participation. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on something that is not on our agenda tonight? Please step forward. Hearing and seeing none. We will seek commissioners. As Mr. Foley is out, we'll seek Commissioner Quarishi for Commissioner Foley. And, pardon me?
Bob Vitteri's also out.
Bob Vitteri. So our next person in line, Paul Bernstein isn't here, so we will seek Commissioner Carey.
So I'm third.
Because you were first last time.
Okay, I'm just teasing
Okay,
you.
so I'm gonna just put that there and that there. Okay. So you're seated for Commissioner Vitteri. Okay, so we'll move to our minutes. We had two weeks or meetings of minutes, April 11th and April 18th. Were there any issues or concerns or comments about the minutes? I just had one, which he is no longer in favor of doing. It, just on page 5 of the April 11th, which, if you want to count paragraph, it's like the 5th paragraph, where it says Chairman Pasaconis commented on screening rooftop solar, which he is no longer in favor of doing. I don't know if I was ever in favor of screening rooftop solar. So I would,
That line?
yeah, just, yeah. I think that's the only thing I had. Did anybody else have any other corrections? Okay, we can either adopt them by consensus or a motion? Consensus, agreed? Okay. April 18th, the same track? Any questions, comments? Hearing none, we'll adopt them by consensus? Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay.
So we're doing 411 and 418, your agenda says 418 and 425, so. Minor correction, 418 and 411.
Yep. 411, 418, yes. That's what, yeah. Okay. Do we have to do another meeting? Okay. We'll move on to new business. First item on our agenda for new business is application 23-14P, South Windsor Wellness Center. Do we have somebody here who would like to? You can be front and center if you'd like. If you could introduce yourself and.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Thomas Thoreau. I'm a chiropractor at South Windsor Wellness Center at 88 Nevers Road. We've had permission for practicing there since 1997, I think, or
97, you're correct, yeah.
So we're here for a 5-year renewal. So I think it was 2000 we added on to our official office that we have currently. And so it's been running smoothly, and this may be the last time before renewal. I'm getting up there in age. But the fact that I don't think there's anything else. The office, anything else I need to add?
No, if you're comfortable with your application? Well, if that completes your presentation, we'll turn to our town staff, our Director of Planning, Michelle Leitner.
So this is a request for renewal of an existing major home occupation at 88 Nevers Road in a rural residential zone. It's indicated first started in 1997 as a chiropractic office. The commission approved the modification 98 to add massage therapy and hydrotherapy. And it's had renewals 2003, 8, 13, and 19 as required. You are currently the business owner as well as the owner of the property. The hours of operation we have on record are Monday 4 to 8, Wednesday and Friday 7 to 8. I'm sorry, 8 a.m. to 4. I'm gonna start over again. You've got varying hours here. You got 7 to 8 a.m. and then 4 to 8 p.m. Tuesday 7 to 8 a.m. and 2 to 6 p.m. Thursday 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. and then Saturday 8 to 2 p.m. And these hours are something that if you want to change those would be the
No more Saturdays.
no more Saturdays.
So if anybody calls up, no Saturdays.
We have had no concerns expressed about this business over all the years we've had here. So we would just ask the applicant to return in 5 years if you choose to continue your business.
You're still here, you're
Well,
still
you
working.
know, 5 years, who knows, right?
Yeah. Okay. So, at this time, we'll open it up to commissioners. Commissioners, any questions, concerns, comments? I just, I know you've got all these hours. If you wanted to, I think this commission is pretty happy with how you've been. We've never heard any complaints. You'd always be welcome to do something like 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., 5 or 6 days a week, whatever you want. If these are the hours you want, then these are the hours you want. I'm not trying to,
Can we modify the hours a little bit?
yeah, absolutely.
Because we've been doing a little bit more mornings and it's not doing too much.
Now's the time.
Yep, so basically Friday mornings from 7:30 to 12. That's it. Thursdays in the afternoon from 12 to 6:30.
You can really go 7 to 7 if you want, 7
That's-
a.m. to 7 p.m.
That's Tuesdays and Wednesdays.
Oh.
7:30 to 6:30. We don't see people over lunch or anything like that.
What's Thursday?
Thursday is like from 12 to 6:30.
We don't charge by the hour. I know you do, but.
You have Monday hours?
Monday hours is in the afternoon, so 12 to 6:30 again.
So Monday and Thursday seem to be 12 to 6:30.
Yes.
Tuesday and Wednesday are 7 to 7, and then Friday is 7:30 to 12.
Just for full disclosure to the commission, I have been a client of Tom's in the past, along with 3 or 4 other chiropractors throughout the town, but Tom does fit me pretty well. I haven't seen you in how many years, but
That's good.
yeah, that's great,
Really well.
believe me, yeah.
You
So-
go to Joke and come over bent over.
Okay, so Michelle, you
got the
document
hours,
those
yeah.
out? Okay, fine.
Go over those hours one more time.
Yes, Monday and Thursday would be 12 to 6:30.
Mhm.
Tuesday and Wednesday would be 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then Friday, 7:30 to 12. No work on Saturday or Sunday.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, anybody? Okay, Commissioner Wagner.
So I move we approve application 23-14P, South Windsor Wellness Center, MHO. Approval is subject to the following conditions. Number 1, the business must be operated by the homeowner. Number 2, the permit will expire on April 25th, 2028, and will have to be renewed at that time. Number 3, only one non-resident employee can be hired. Number 4, the hours of operation are limited to Monday and Thursday from 12 to 6:30, Tuesday and Wednesday from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., and Friday from 7:30 a.m. to 12 noon. Refuse from the business cannot be disposed of with residential refuse. Adequate arrangements must be made for business refuse disposal.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions, concerns, comments? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you
Good
very
luck.
much.
No guarantees on that one.
Okay. Our next item, number 2, is discussion, take care, on a correspondence we received for application 21-17P, precisely Panda's Daycare. And I'll turn it over to Michelle.
So if you recall, we approved, that's on the corner from John Fitch and Route 5, John Fitch and Governor's Highway, I'm sorry. The southwesterly corner, it was the old bank building, and she's been operating there. We did have her do some modifications to the site for traffic flow and whatnot. She has completed all of those. She's now requesting to up her numbers by 16. She currently has 36, it would put her up to 52, primarily to try to accommodate some after-school needs that we have in the community. So she was approved by special exception at that location. She has adequate square footage based on what the state requires her to have. So we would be the first step. She would have to go through fire and building, and the state would come out and, you know, do their licensing as well. But starting with her request to increase her numbers.
Is this also increases her hours? Or no? It's always been till 5:30,
Yeah,
right?
it's always been there, yeah.
Yeah,
No,
okay,
it's just-
okay.
So most of the increase is after school hours?
It's for after-school hours, you have to
Okay.
accommodate the after-school needs.
And that's,
So,
So basically, the request would be to increase the number of capacity to 52 students from 36 at this location.
so I see this listed on the agenda as a discussion. So, not, a motion wouldn't be needed at this point, but is she gonna come back?
No, well, I guess I would be looking for a motion, a discussion and/or action on it.
Mhm.
She's looking for me to be able to sign off on a piece of paper that says she can have 52 children, is what she's looking for, so.
Okay. So commissioners, a motion would be in order.
I do have her site plan here if you want to see it, or, and we can have her come back and explain it if you want, but
Well,
like I said.
This change doesn't really
It
affect,
doesn't affect anything on the site. The site was made whole by what we required her to do. So this is really a capacity issue that she can accommodate within the existing building.
and some of her use will, I don't know if she was using the basement before, is that correct?
That's probably where she's expanding into the basement, yeah.
I don't think we really have an issue with that. Other departments,
We'll be
Might-
reviewing it for building
Yeah.
code and fire code, yeah. And there's adequate parking on site. That's usually the concern, and there's plenty of parking
Yeah.
parking's not a concern out there.
There's no issue with the outdoor play space?
No, they had, it's a fenced-in area that.
It says 20 children, but now there'll be 52, but I guess
Yeah,
it's
they-
they're not
they-
all there at once.
They stagger them in,
what I
they
figured.
actually bisect play spaces, they get very creative.
Okay. So, motion would just be, to approve the request for additional kids up to 52 students, correct?
Okay, I move that we, in consideration of application 21-17P, precisely Panda's Daycare, we approve an increase in capacity from 36 students to 52 students.
Okay, we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Question carried. Okay, discussion, any questions, concerns, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, let's see, this. Here. Our next item is our PCC sponsored text amendment for our changes to the moratorium and new truck and freight terminals, warehouses, and all about distribution centers. Steve made a suggestion that we go through this, and we've got a lot of items. Steve, are you suggesting we go through just all of them individually, or just the ones that we?
There's some of them where there's a suggestion from staff or a suggestion from one of us.
Okay.
Those are the ones that I think we ought to reach a consensus on.
Well, we can buzz through it real quick and
Yeah.
see if, I mean,
Rather than everybody each sitting down and going through all of our ideas.
and then going back and, yeah, okay. That's a good suggestion, and, I'm fine with that. The first red line is remove the truck moratorium, which will be, eventually done when we agree on this. Screening requirements, A. Public way, I don't think there's been any issues on that. 2.1 or 2.11C, we just removed the TNC permit.
We also added a requirement that you could only have your screenage along 50% of the frontage, right?
Yep.
20% of the front yard setback and 50% of the frontage.
Okay, and any equipment shall be displayed in retracted position, which is good. If anybody has an issue, wants to comment on something, please shout out, okay? Down to section 2.16, talking about solar panels on flat roofs.
So actually, the purpose of that paragraph has nothing to do with the flat roof. So I would say that, in that place, we should delete the solar panel.
Yeah, I'm actually all right with it. It's one of those things I've been driving around, I'm all over the place, and I see a lot of these, especially in Fairfield County, and they project really no more than the height of this desk. They're about 3 or 4 feet in projection, and usually they're installed in a linear fashion. I don't find them that disturbing. Not like a large rooftop unit.
I mean, excuse me, this is actually just dealing with ancillary structures.
But I think part of the issue is that, again, it's an elevation type thing. If your building is here and you're up here, you're gonna see everything. If you're level with the building, you're not gonna see that much. It's the Costco argument. Sits in a hole, you're gonna see it.
So you're suggesting eliminate solar panels and on flat roofs, just in general, just eliminate that whole,
In this paragraph, yes.
yeah, okay.
So we would,
We would just read condition units and similar devices shall observe.
okay, I'm good with that. I'll expect everybody else is good with it, because nobody's saying anything, so, okay. Just scratch that green comment down there. We're on the next page, 2, no changes. Page 3, automobile repair. I don't think we've had any issues with page 3. Correct me if I'm wrong, or stop me if I'm overstating.
Well, we did have public concern about turning automotive repair into a special exception. Particularly someone who's looking to do that, that currently has it as a permitted use. So we did have that. The other thing I just want to point out is at I think Commissioner Wagner's suggestion, I tried to group the automotive stuff together. So a couple of pages later, you'll see the automotive kind of grouped together.
Yes,
And-
yep.
So although it's here, it's also in 2 pages from now.
Yep.
I didn't have it in both places, but if we like the grouping, I'll insert the grouping into this appropriately, alphabetically into the chart.
Okay, so the concern that was voiced was changing automotive to a special exception if it abuts a residential zone. Any thoughts, Commission?
I kinda like it.
You like it?
I like having some control as the town. Nothing against automotive, but I look at these places that are out there and they're somewhat disorderly.
I understand that. Steve, did you have anything, or?
I like the idea of that special exception situation.
Yeah. My only concern is automotive is generally done inside a building. And
It is, but when it's hot, they fling the garage doors open and there's more activity and the trucks are half in the bay, that type of thing. I mean, I do it too. I mean, if there's no air conditioning in the bay, you wanna keep somewhat cool. So there are distractions depending on what type of, or time of year it is.
And the
Yep.
other thing is that they're gonna park a bunch of cars that need various degrees of repair outside while they're working on whatever's inside. So it's not just seeing the automobile being partially disassembled, it's actually seeing it sitting out in the lot. I mean, I think we'd wanna question them.
Well, and too, from the noise perspective, we have had noise complaints of automotive uses next to residential zones.
okay,
So we do have that, and then at least you can put hours of operation on it, or something like that, not that you would necessarily eliminate noise, but you could at least know what noise to
Right.
anticipate and that kind of stuff.
Mitigates it.
Yeah. I don't think it's a bad idea.
okay, so what I'm hearing is leave it as planned.
What's not on your sheet there, because I did do a couple corrections, on page 4, I think, again, Commissioner Wagner, under the EV chargers, I think you wanted me to add that it's an accessory use in any zone, just in that, under the additional provisions.
Okay, just so we're clear, we're done with page 3, I believe.
Yes.
Okay. And EV chargers, that was,
It's listed as how you can have it as a primary use, but I think you
It
want.
starts out as EVSE on the left.
yep,
Okay.
So we would just add accessory, allowed as accessory use in any zone. Have an EV charger station.
allowed as accessory use.
And that's just carrying forward the requirement in, the section that actually deals with, section
Yeah.
appendix H.
Yeah.
Okay. What classifies as accessory use for this particular use? What,
Accessory, I mean, it would be, you have your building and then
less
you
than
have.
20% of
Yeah.
the,
Well,
In the
accessory use
building
would
code,
just
it's
be,
less than 10%.
yeah, I
in the
mean, I
building
guess I
codes,
just
but
look at it as
I'm
not
not
the
sure
primary,
what's
I mean, you have a
different in
building
this.
and then you have a couple EV chargers, it's
Yeah.
not.
You have a restaurant.
It's not your main function,
your
but just
main
an ancillary
focus,
part
right.
of it.
okay,
I don't know if we'll get in a point where we have to regulate it further, but I think to start with, we wanna encourage it.
yeah, okay. Okay, is there anything else on page 4?
When you start
I was looking
fitness
at page
facility-
4, did the distances change at all, like 500 feet, 1,750, or those stayed pretty much intact?
Those
Just a
reflect
question.
what is later on in what we've had all along, those are still
Okay.
intact. And again, I did similar to the warehouse, I did a chart of just warehouse too.
Yep.
So you'll see a couple pages that if you wanna approach it that way, again, I think Commissioner Wagner suggested.
Okay. So what I'm seeing on page 4 is acceptable, everything else at this time? We
Just
can,
fitness facilities,
Yeah,
yeah.
why was that on?
No, it's on the next page.
Oh, we went to the
Oh.
next page, okay, sorry.
so, are we at page 5 now? I know the first red one had some public comment.
Yeah, I think when we originally drafted that, and it may have been my mistake, I thought we were thinking that if it was next to a residential zone, it would be a special exception. It wasn't for anything over 40,000 square feet. It was only those 40,000 square feet adjacent to residential zones is what it should have said.
Right.
And
Okay.
so that's what I think would take away a lot of the concern that we had expressed that anytime you did a facility over 40,000 square feet, your special exception, no matter where you are. I think that was a concern.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, so again, the idea we had talked about at our committee was,
Yeah,
at that point, you're starting to see maybe some more truck traffic, and then at least you could look for truck traffic patterns, or You could look at some other criteria
No, but
especially.
I guess it's just me, I'm cynical as a person, but say you have your residential zone, you have something here, and now you're putting this larger warehouse, if you will. Your impact in a neighborhood's still gonna be there, even though you're one building out.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? That's probably should be looked at or at least scrutinized by us. Because your impact's gonna be the same whether you're right next door or you're one building out. Truck is still gonna come through the neighborhood and it's still gonna happen. That's just me.
Yep. Any other thoughts, commissioners?
I could go with it either way.
So we're saying facilities over 40,000 square feet. I'm not great at this. How big is a facility that's over 40,000 square feet?
See, if I were a clever developer, I'd go one lot out and I'd go 80,000 square feet.
Right, yeah, but
No, but I think the point is manufacturing and those kinds of things aren't, or don't necessarily be the big truck generators like a distribution facility is in those other kinds of uses. I mean, we have a lot of industrial manufacturing going on in our town currently, you know, up and down Nutmeg Road in other areas, so. And those are good-sized facilities there. I don't know if you'd want every one of those to have to be a special exception on Nutmeg Road, for example. I think that's.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to encourage, I mean, this is one of those, I guess this is one of those business-friendly situations where as soon as you require a special exception, that is a negative to the investment it takes just to come in with an application and a site plan. I mean, people spend a lot of money coming up with these site plans, and now we're gonna say, well, we don't know whether we're gonna approve you or not.
So to me, I look at it as a special exception near residential adjacent to it, because then you could look at the use and then you could potentially put some protections in place through your special exception criteria or your buffering and things like that for those kinds of uses. So I agree with Steve. I don't really think it's necessary.
Okay. No,
It's
not
kind
just
of-
kind
it's
path
kind of
for
a good
us.
compromise,
That's
too.
all.
Yeah, it is. I think that, you know, it will, again, help protect the residents, but give the business
small
community a
business.
little bit of
Yeah.
Relief from the
do we,
requirement.
do
So-
we need to define adjacent?
Well, adjacent is just that, immediately next touching.
Okay, so then that won't address your issue.
Yes, it would be adjacent to, so it'd be, it'd be touching a residential zone, so yeah.
To residential. Is everyone good with that? Okay.
have residents here,
Yeah.
you can put the 45 square foot here.
I don't see anything else on that page, so we'll move to page 6.
I think the only thing that happened here was we struck fitness facilities from page 4 and just added a phrase halfway down the page here.
Yep.
Another change.
And it's site plan, I don't think that's an issue. Okay, so we'll move on to page 7. We have the top one, storage facilities, self-storage. And it's site plan / special exception in industrial, I think is the issue.
Well, we didn't have it anywhere, so we're adding it originally into the general commercial, and then the public requested we add it into the industrial as well.
And it's any storage, cold storage,
This is self-storage facilities, yeah.
Self-storage?
Self-storage, this is specifically defining a self-storage facility.
okay, there's the
So
words.
the climate control facility we approved would not require a special exception, just as an example, because it's not abutting.
A residential zone.
Although, you know, your I-291 has its own set of rules separate, but yeah.
Okay.
If it were an industrial zone, that's a true statement, yes.
And the same thing with the general commercial zone, correct?
Correct, yep.
Yeah.
And then I think Commissioner Wagner wanted the exterior be screened from roadways, so you didn't want doors facing the public.
Seen enough of those.
Yeah.
When they sun around.
Everyone's good with that?
Yep.
Okay, we'll move on I don't see, let's see,
So there was a lot of discussion from the public on the warehousing and whether or not warehousing, at what point should there be a distance? What we're proposing is warehouses are allowed adjacent to residential zones. Once they're over 40,000 square feet, they become a special exception. That's what was proposed in this regulation. You did have comments, I think both ways on that.
We skipped the truck and freight terminals, I'm happy with that, but just,
didn't have any public comment against that. So,
Yep.
yeah, I'm good with that. So Michelle was on the warehouses.
I think the idea of the 40,000 square feet was, there's a lot of different things that qualify as a warehouse that aren't that big. And we just didn't wanna get them involved in the whole special exception thing unless they're pretty big.
And we've kind of established that 40,000 square
it's gotta
feet
be no
kind of
threshold,
cutoff,
yeah.
you know? What keeps it. Makes sense.
And 40,000 square feet is a 200 by 200 foot building,
Okay.
so,
Pretty big.
yeah.
Size of the town hall? Smaller. Footprint of the town hall? I mean, us girls can't. you know,
Yeah,
we-
Michelle might have
Yeah.
better input
You
on
know, I
that.
always look at the bank, or the building across the street, the medical building is 15,000 square feet on 2 floors. So that's always, that's a small one. Stop and Shop's about 65,000 square feet.
Yep.
Okay.
You know, so you
Okay.
start
Okay.
looking at
Thank you.
different.
Thank you, thank you.
Very
Yeah, that
good,
helps.
yeah, appreciate that, Michelle. Not just the girls.
Trust me, I do too.
Stephanie and I had a discussion about girls all the way walking
All the way
in.
from the parking lot, after I parked my car like a girl.
One thing I just wanted to differentiate was 40,000 square feet versus 40,000 square foot footprint. And I don't know if it,
It doesn't differentiate. Right now, I mean, it could be 2 stories at 20,000. Do you want it as a,
I think the 40,000 square feet also kind of gives you an indication of how much business they're doing and.
you know, and it just seems to me like a site, you know, if you go 2 stories, you might leave yourself room for more later on. I don't know, I think you just might want to do it by square footage.
okay.
I think it's too complicated otherwise. I did want to make a comment about this, the paragraph about the special exception for parking lots in excess of 50 cars. That really, that was me putting something in there. That's a mistake on my part. We really did not discuss or intend to do that for industrial parking lots. That kind of gets kicked in when you're doing a drive-through facility and you're having a retail, like a general commercial zone, and you have a Phil Tarsinis' project where he has a lot of parking. That kicks into a special exception so you can view the traffic a little better. It really was not intended for industrial property, so
Okay.
I would just,
So that whole paragraph that kind of fits at the bottom of the table,
yeah.
is it not reflected in the individual items above?
No. Not the part that says in a GC zone, that, you mean that?
Mhm.
Buildings excessive, no, it is not in there at all. It was just a caveat that was written in a long time ago.
Do we want this whole
Well,
thing?
again, how it's used is if you have a general commercial property, which you don't have a lot of them, but you do, and it's gonna have 50 or more cars. So the last time it was used was down at 150 Sullivan Ave, where you had Phil Tarsinis' 3 buildings approved. That was a special exception because it was over 50 cars.
Mexicali.
Is it 40,000 square feet or 50 cars, or,
I think it's and 50 cars. And a non-drive, and he had a drive-through with that as
because I
well.
didn't think he's over 40,000 square feet, is he, or,
In the 3 buildings?
well, if you add the 3
Yeah,
buildings.
yeah, so it would be the site, you know, you would be adding the
Okay.
whole site
Yep,
collectively, you wouldn't add just one building.
So let me just do a little computer logic here. If I have a building in excess of 40,000 square feet, but I don't have a 50-car parking space, this doesn't apply.
Correct.
I have to have all 3 of those conditions to require a special exception. In other words, I gotta have 40,000 square feet, gotta have 50 cars, and I have to have a non-back drive-through in order for this to apply.
So in other words, we're getting anything that may be a fast food restaurant in a plaza area
Mhm.
requires a special exception. Your fast food restaurant doesn't automatically require a special exception.
I guess that my problem is, I know how people read things.
So you wanna clarify it?
I just wanna, if we really want all three things before this comes into force, we wanna word it so that it's clear we're talking about all three and not any one of them.
Yeah, because I was originally under the perception that if anything adjacent to residential would fall under special exception. So I think at least clarifying that it would have to be all three would be important.
Okay. And we're all in agreement, we're removing industrial, correct?
Yep.
Okay. The green comment to come out, of course, and we're following Michelle's
So
recommendation.
the one other comment that I think we had, that's the last comment on this page, was whether or not, and I'll use Aldi's as this situation. So you have Aldi's that's sitting out there, it's a permitted use currently, it's approved by site plan. Now we're saying all distribution facilities are special exception uses. So if they want to do some kind of small addition, 10,000 square foot addition for office area or whatever, is there some threshold that we might want to consider that doesn't kick them into special exception? So in other words, do we want to allow maybe a 20% addition before it's considered a new special exception, or give some leeway so that, they're putting on a small little area, you're not automatically making them non-conforming and needing a special exception for everything?
Yeah, the whole thing about Aldi's is, what's 20% of their square footage?
They're what, 500,000 plus, I mean, it would be.
That's 10,000 square feet, correct? Or 100,000?
No, 20%.
500, 20% is 100.
Go right over here. Thank you. Yeah, we can just take that.
Those of you who don't know my wife, this is Karen Wagner. Turning the camera that she used for the Transportation Committee
Thank you, Karen.
Commission.
Yeah, 100,000 square feet addition.
Yeah, so you think it's too much?
Well, not necessarily in relation to the rest of the buildings in South Windsor. How many do we have that are that big?
Let's talk about the ones that might be put into jeopardy by our regulation. So you have the FedEx building, for example, there's room to grow in the FedEx building. You have the Aldi's building, there's room to grow there. I don't really think you have any room with the Mobis or the other two on Sullivan Ave.
Unless they merge the properties.
Yeah, but I don't think you have much developable land left, but there is a piece along Sullivan Ave that you're right, that could get merged in that one lot there. And then you look in your 291 corridor, all those properties there, I mean, Coca-Cola might be able to put a small expansion on, I don't know if Home Depot has any room or Amazon, nothing significant, but you might see some minor expansions down in that area. You might even consider, and this is just, again, I'm thinking of some of the comments that we had at the public hearing, you might even consider, say, the 291 zone doesn't apply to these separating distances because you really don't have any more developable land like that. So then you wouldn't make everybody non-conforming down there, right? So if you didn't say you had to have these separating distances, everybody would, under the I-291 zone, those guys would be able to expand if they had any expandability at those places through site plan approval like they were approved originally. They wouldn't become non-conforming because they're within 500 foot of a residential area. And you could, again, it's 291 area is different than your industrial zone, so you could treat those differently. Again, I'm just trying to get some of the concern we had of making people non-conforming and making it so that the process for expanding was cumbersome or.
I guess I'm confused about why we're talking about non-conforming.
Well, so how zoning works is when you change your regulation, right, if you have to be 500 feet from a residential zone to be a distribution facility and you're now non-conforming.
Okay, and how does that apply here?
Well, my question was for people, Peter DeMaili, for example, brought up Aldi's.
Mhm.
Okay, so it so happens that they meet the 500 feet, so they are not within 500 feet. However, they would have to become a special exception use for any kind of expansion out there. So the question was, is there some kind of expansion that can occur on existing sites that are already currently operating in town without having to become something that needs to get a special exception, or in some situations needing to get a variance to be expanded nonconformity. So it was an attempt to try to think of some situations that we might mitigate. We have a map here, and it's, we're not that big of a town that you can't figure out which pieces we're affecting. And like I said, FedEx is affected, Aldi's is affected, and primarily your 291 corridor, those pieces there.
Okay, so if we put that does not apply to the 291 zone.
That helps any of those businesses that might want to do a minor addition or whatever. You're not gonna see anything new of any size go down there, you don't have the land left.
Right, okay, and then if, I believe her suggestion is we allow up to 20% expansion without a special exception. How does the commission feel about that?
On existing properties that are already developed.
Yeah.
That makes sense. We don't wanna penalize people who are in our town that are doing a good job and that we wanna keep.
Let's just say it's Aldi's and that 20% now brings them bordering a different part of the site plan where there's residential. Would the buffer be to the new regs for that expansion, or would it be?
Well, see, Aldi's doesn't even abut residential.
Okay.
They have a property between them and the residential area, so they don't have a buffer requirement.
Okay.
It's
Is there any-
industrial behind it.
It's industrial behind it and industrial really north of it. I mean, there's only a small part of residential right there. It would come in through site plan approval, certainly, yeah. I mean, maybe you wanna do 10%. I mean, as you pointed out, that's a big number when it's a big facility. Maybe 10% at least shows that you're willing to work with them, and if that's not the right number, or, someone approaches us and tells us really it needed to be 20% or something. I mean, I don't know, you could consider another number. I just think it would be beneficial to give people some opportunity to
I agree with,
be able to.
I agree with
plan.
that, I just nervous about 20, but.
Well, we can always have somebody come in if there's something, I mean, if we go to 10%, it gives them a lot of opportunity. And then we could always revisit it in the future if it was an issue at that time. But we're not restricting them.
Right. Which I think is,
Well, it's probably gonna be,
much.
I mean, if they're one of those people that's affected by this between 10 and 20, it's gonna be cheaper for them to come in for the special exception than it is to come in for a zoning change, text amendment, and then, so I guess I'd go with the 10%, 15%, something like that. But we're probably not gonna get a text amendment request. Somebody can go in with a special exception and get the job done.
Right.
Can I go back?
Well,
I'm sorry, are we finished?
if,
Yeah.
yeah, I just wanna finish it.
So what's the
any-
wording that we'd be approving here, and where is it gonna go?
I think for probably later on under the section 2.24, right? We're gonna have to put something caveat in it somewhere. I haven't really, as we go through this, I'll figure out a location.
Okay, and I think part of our goal tonight is to get these really finalized and then
The final
have Michelle
draft.
come back with a final document and then we'll do a final approval.
Yeah, cause I wanna figure out the right location for it, but
Okay.
we'll come up with it.
So I apologize apologize, but I'd like to go back to this paragraph with the 40,000 square feet, parking in excess of 50 and non-bank drive-through. Do we have any 200 by 200 foot buildings with a drive-through? Is that something we're actually gonna see?
Well,
Go ahead.
Michelle said it could be a combination of buildings such as Phil Tarsinis's.
One building's 15,000, one's 25,000, one's 12,000. You've got over 40,000 square foot of building on that side. So
Where's
it's-
this?
I mean, I'm just giving you an example of a site that could happen.
Well, it could happen up by Aldi's too, somebody wanted to put in a Burger King.
That's Phil.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I'm having trouble imagining a 40,000 square foot Burger King.
No, it's cumulative of the buildings, so not one building would be 40,000 square feet. It would be the multiple buildings on a site equal 40,000 square feet or greater.
Maybe that's something we gotta clear up in the
Yeah.
language.
Yeah.
Because it does say buildings in excess of versus, applications.
Square footage total in excess of.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Is that,
Okay, thank you.
okay. Are there any other of those 4 bullets that we haven't addressed?
There is this question of the special exception review criteria, but I think we ought to delay that one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
Does that,
that's a study in itself.
yeah, and that's got to do with,
Would
I
that
believe,
make sense
state
to you?
statutes.
well, I mean, the criteria are somewhat subjective. I mean, we reviewed them a while back when we wrote our regulations in 2007, so it's not that they have never been looked at, but I mean, you can always reconsider what you look at. I took a look at what some other towns are looking at, and, you know, they're not that far off. Some aren't quite as detailed as ours, so
We'll put that on
the
for
future.
consideration.
would that be like something the P O C D could help
Sure,
us
could help
outline?
us inform us, sure,
Okay.
yep. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, we're on to page 8. Proposed simplifying of motor vehicle uses. I'm fine with any of the changes. Steve, this was mostly your concern, correct?
Or is this a suggestion that we group them together to make it easier to understand the
Yep.
different situations?
And we really didn't have any negative input from the public about it. So if everyone's fine with the proposed changes, we'll move on to page 9.
I guess I did have one.
Okay.
Okay,
Sorry.
we have one called automotive fuel, and we have motor vehicle refueling / re-energizing. But I mean, automotive fuel is motor vehicle refueling, those are the
You know,
same.
and actually, I'm just trying to think of, that's under a design commercial zone, which is something we don't even, I mean, we have one piece of property zoned that way. So I almost would say you could, it talks about the gateway zone, so I almost think you could eliminate that automotive fuel, because it talks about, in the gateway zone, we have very specific regulations related to automotive fuel, which this kind of got added to this here. This is design commercial, so that's that piece behind Joanne Fabrics, which is just a weird piece to even have automotive fuel.
So if we remove that, would that just be by site plan?
And only in the,
Your design commercial zone, the whole thing's gonna be a special exception, it's a 30-acre plan that you have to come in with, so any automotive fuel is gonna show up on a plan.
Under a special exception anyway?
Yeah.
Okay,
So I think you could just take, you could add automotive fuel below, just to have it there if you want it, or you could just take out that line, and you wouldn't be losing anything.
okay, now we had a separate, re-energizing really is EVSE. We had a separate EVSE thing back on page 4, where we allowed that in a special exception in 4 of the zones.
So if we were to add it into travel service zone on page 4, you could probably take it out here. Because travel service zone, if you recall, came in as a separate text amendment, and they just were doing a lot of that there, so, I mean, I think you could probably add it just right here, like you're suggesting on page 4, and then eliminate that.
The only thing is, in the travel zone, we're allowing refueling. And
By
all the
site
other
plan.
places, we're only allowing E EVSE. On page 4.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, maybe we ought to move EVSE into the same section here,
Okay,
and then have one for refueling and one for E EVSE.
okay.
I guess if somebody wanted to do EVSE in a travel zone, should probably allow it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Although it would be probably, I mean, I can't imagine someone putting in a gas station and not with E EVSE and making it the primary use, so it'd be an accessory use in all this,
Right.
so, okay.
So you want me to move the EVSE into this area here?
Yeah.
And we'll make it 2
Yeah.
different, okay.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. I think that completes page 8. And we'll move on to page 9. Excuse me.
One of the questions that came up on the whole warehouse thing is, what are the measurements from? Are we measuring it to a zone line? From the zone line to a property line, to the use on the property? And it's a valid question because, you know, properties can be vine, can be, you know, you could cut them off.
You
at
can
a
straddle
certain-
both,
Right.
yeah.
I mean, and I could see where a very large piece, 500 feet into it, and you could have your use and still have this other area over here. So is there something, you know, is there some way you want to look at, like all aspects that make the site work, 500 feet from there, you know, that make the site parking areas and, you know, the elements that make the site plan, or, I mean, rather than the property line as a measurement?
I know, it's almost like again, I always think of the worst case scenario, like a developer buys 4 lots. And now you can creep your project into a different zone if it straddles both. I mean, there are people who would take advantage of that.
Well, the 500 foot's gonna be the 500-foot mark, so I mean, you're gonna have a mark in the sand of 500 feet
Yeah.
that activity has to be beyond. But does that 500 feet have to be a property line, I guess is the question? Or can it be I mean, just look at your map here. Where we put the 500 feet, you bisect a lot of properties. So what are we saying? Right now, we wrote it that your property has to entirely be outside of the 500 foot or 750, whatever the use is you're looking at.
Oh, yeah,
So
that's
you're
what
saying is that okay,
Yeah,
we've got a residential zone here,
That's a solid fixed line, correct?
Okay. And we have a building here that's gonna be a warehouse. And we're saying that the building has to be 500 feet from the,
So the question is, what are we
asking,
saying?
is that what we mean?
Is that what we mean? Right now, we're saying that that property that holds that warehouse has to be 500 feet. Do we mean that? Do we mean that we have to have a 500-foot distance to where the parking area is, and then the building, and then everything else?
right.
What are we measuring the 500 feet
I mean,
to,
I think
guess
one of
is
the concerns is the actual truck traffic within the site, so I wouldn't wanna make it just the building.
So I would suggest all activities surrounding the site that make the site function
Mhm.
would have to be a minimum of the 500 feet.
Right, so the parking, the truck traffic, the truck spaces, whatever.
Yeah, not just the building.
The perimeter drive.
Yeah, I was thinking like,
Yeah, any driveway aspects to it or any of that stuff.
say you've had a piece of farmland and it straddles both zones or zoning areas, if you will. Can you extend one zoning regulation into another?
No. I mean, each zone has to be supported by what the
That's a
zone allows.
definitive line.
It's a definitive line, yeah.
Okay, good.
So why don't I craft some language along those lines?
Mhm.
But again, the only other situation I think of the driveway though, but then I'm thinking, well, maybe you have a driveway that services more than one building. So again, we'll have to craft it so that we're addressing what the concern is, the actual use of the warehouse and the distribution facility or whatever it is, and the activities associated with it, so.
I mean, do we wanna include the driveway as part of the 500 feet?
Well,
or
I
do we
think, I
not?
can see a situation where it may or may not, work, because again, if it's a multi-tenant facility,
Mhm.
that driveway, it could be a public road that's servicing multiple businesses, so we'll have to, let me give it some thought.
It might not be the driveway, but the perimeter road.
Perimeter road, the trucks are all gonna
The
be,
trucks are, remember that was the big thing with the trucks queuing on the road? Don't we want that
That should be
away
part
from
of
the
500.
residential?
minimum 500 feet, yeah.
Now, there's also automobile parking, which is less of a concern. I don't know, do we want that also to be 500 feet?
Mhm. I would think so. I would think all aspects that make the site work. Yeah. All the supporting parking and drives and dumpster areas or whatever might need lighting, all that kind of stuff really would, I would say would have to be
So
500.
really what you're left with is detention basins and buffers.
Potentially, yeah. Mhm.
And
Towards the residential
residential.
side.
Right.
Or other properties, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
makes
'cause
sense to me.
that was one of the big complaints from the public
Basically
was the
otherwise.
dumpsters.
Yeah.
Hanging on the dumpsters.
That poor lady.
Okay, let's just go line by line with this chart. Warehouses less than 40,000 square feet are by site plan. Adjacent to residential zone, require a special exception.
That didn't line up very well. I gotta line that up better.
Yeah,
So are
that,
these meant to
that's
line
for
up,
the
or-
one above.
Yeah, they didn't line
below.
up very well, yeah.
Right. It should be blank for that one, correct?
Yeah, site plan is just less than 40,000 square feet, straight site
The
plan.
whole right column should be jogged down, I
Yeah.
believe, but we'll continue on.
All right, no, I'm confused now.
Okay, there shouldn't be anything next to less than 40,000 square feet.
So if I was gonna draw lines across this, how would I draw that first line?
It would jog up above,
Like
Go
that?
up, yep.
yeah, yep,
There you
So
go.
here's what I just did, okay.
Yeah, that's what I did on mine too.
okay. Now, warehouses greater than 40,000 square feet are, special exception. And
Adjacent to residential.
adjacent to residential require a special exception. So that would encompass the first paragraph in the far right column.
Now, is that restating something that we just discussed elsewhere? Yeah, the page 5.
Yeah, this is the new column if we were to put warehousing all together. This
Okay.
is the chart.
Page 5, we were talking about manufacturing, et cetera.
Yeah.
This is warehousing, okay,
Yep.
got it.
And that applies for greater than 40,000 square feet and self-storage. If they're greater than 40,000 square feet next to a residential zone, it's a special exception. Otherwise, they'd be permitted site plans.
So if I'm gonna draw, where am I gonna draw
I,
that line?
so, yeah, I actually was premature, I should have added self-storage to that.
Self-storage, too, yeah, so the warehouse greater than 40,000 and self-storage both have that paragraph that applies to it being a special exception over 40.
Okay, so add that one in there. And eliminate the squiggle, the line in between those two. Okay. Then,
Distribution facility.
well, just for a second here, I just wanna make a point on the warehouses, greater than 40,000 square feet. There was testimony from the public, that they wanted warehouses included in the 500 foot. And their point was to not include them in the 500-foot is actually an incentive to have a property be used as a warehouse rather than a distribution center. And warehouses are kind of like one of the lower taxed uses. I don't really feel that they're the best use of a property.
They're quieter.
There could be better uses of properties for, such as manufacturing or I'll just say manufacturing because that's a good example.
Yep.
That have better tax base uses rather than warehouses.
Jobs.
And to be honest, the comment that Merrick had said, zone for what you want. We've got a plethora of warehouses. I really don't feel we need more warehouses near residential. I would be in favor of having the 500-foot address warehouses also. But
Let me just ask you, what if you were to look at warehouses of a certain size, having to be 500 feet? And the only reason I say that is, warehouses can be very small, and a lot of your small little businesses may put a warehouse on their property, and I would hate to think that you couldn't have a warehouse associated with your manufacturing operations or whatever. It depends on how you define the warehouse or how narrow you define it. I could see that being a problem in a lot of these, smaller businesses that you have, that do warehousing of products and things like that.
So we've got somebody who makes electrical parts, and I think we got at least one of those businesses in town. We'd want to be able to have a warehouse without having to mess with this.
Exactly, yeah, and
It's quieter.
the 500, I think you might really have unintended consequences if it's a size you want to put on it. If you're concerned about a big warehouse or whatever, let's put a size that says it's got to be so many. If it's over X number of feet, it's got to be 500 feet or something. If you have that concern, I just think that just to flat out, warehouses to me are one of the less intensity used next to a residential zone potentially. They could be quiet, depending on where they are and what they're used for.
This would be warehouses over 40,000 square feet, correct?
Well, again, they wanted all warehouses to be a minimum of 500 feet, and that's what I thought you were headed towards. So that's what I'm saying. I would be concerned if we did that. If you want to put a 500-foot distance, I think you want to put a size with it.
I agree.
We weren't really talking about any size with
Yeah,
warehouses
'cause-
at all.
Right, the height and area have a lot to do with it. That's why they put them up further, but a small warehouse that's 18 feet high and say that it's 100 by,
And again, in our definitions, we kind of defined a warehouse as something having less, truck bays and things like that. So the intensity, in
Yeah.
theory, is less than a distribution facility or some other type of use. So that was kind of the thought process of the
it's almost like
committee.
once you reach a certain square footage, you introduce that distance.
Well, what I was suggesting is the top right of this column where it says over 40,000 square feet for
Must be
warehouses.
a minimum of 500.
Yeah. Feet from a residential zone.
So are we talking then 40,000 square feet in one building? Again, I'm trying to get you at what are you trying to
That's a good
regulate?
question.
What are you trying to regulate here?
Because you can actually have two smaller buildings close to each other that add up to 60,000 square feet.
Yep, and
Yeah, but I mean, all you gotta do is put a property line between them and, I think we're talking about the building. not the total number of buildings. I mean, someone has a big site, they wanna put 3 buildings on it, as opposed to 3 sites with the same 3 buildings, they ought to have the same rules.
You know, typically they would break it up anyway, if it was 3 different buildings.
Well, they could have two separate uses, one could be refrigerated and one not, you know, it's one owner.
Yeah, but,
They see what goes on in other towns, and I've seen these scenarios like Rocky Hills, a strange area, you see these buildings right on top of each other.
Yep.
Whether they're separate lots or one lot, I couldn't tell you.
But I'm thinking of that, as you go north on Nutmeg and the road curves to the right, there's a
Yeah, yeah.
facility across the street. And there used to be one owner, now there are 2,
Yep, yep,
you know.
I just drove through there.
I can't remember the name of the company, but.
Where they had 2 brown buildings, you mean?
Yeah,
What?
right?
Right, straight ahead of you, there are 2 brown buildings there that are not
Yeah.
separated, yeah.
As I recall, there used to be one company. and now-
It was one, and they had 2 buildings, and then they subdivided, yeah, you're right, they did. Main Oxy was one of them.
Yeah.
because, you know, my intent is addressing the warehouse issue. But, you know, if one building was manufacturing and one was warehouse, I think that would differentiate itself
Right.
about, you know, the square footage. It wouldn't be cumulative if one was manufacturing versus warehouse. Would that be correct, Michelle?
We also have the same thing on the manufacturing, I mean,
Okay. And we don't wanna,
like on page 6, I think, or 4.
yeah. Page 5. 6 or 4, 5.
Take the average. And that talks about facilities, which I guess means one building.
But there's no 500 foot for manufacturing, correct?
No.
Right. And that's in the industrial zone. Okay. How do others feel about the 500 foot for warehouses? Are you in favor of it, against it?
I like it.
I'm all right with it.
I have no concerns.
I think that's the intent of the committee, and I think we're all kind of buying into that. The only question I think that we're getting confused over is whether we're talking about one building or all the buildings on a site.
So what happens on Route 5, for example, on the west side of Route 5, you pretty much take away any warehousing to be able to occur on that, because your residential zone is pretty close. So when you start putting a 500 foot measurement.
Back there, was that King Street or?
Yeah, I just wanna take a look at that.
Yeah, I mean, and that may be something that you wanna just, I can make sure everybody gets in that, but. So the orange is your 500 foot line.
Right. And we'll do it over here, you're saying on the west side,
Yeah,
correct?
so on the west side, like of this area here, this is nothing along here. For example, your Mastech building, you wouldn't allow warehousing, that wouldn't be able to be used for warehousing, which, you know, might be the juice. I mean, you may impact properties here, that's, you don't have a lot of, your residential zone comes pretty far over, on this side over here.
But even if you wanted to use like the Nestec properties, doesn't it drop off like really quickly in Pleasant Valley?
Right,
You're
the
right at the
building's
edge
right
of the
here,
hill.
yeah.
And the land goes right
But
down.
this would say that wouldn't qualify.
Yeah,
So it would qualify for manufacturing though, right?
Yes.
It just wouldn't qualify for warehouse.
Yeah, correct, yeah. And is this one the, which one is the,
Or if it was less than 40,000, how big is the Mestec building, do you know?
no, not off the top of my head, I'd have to look at it, I don't know.
That's gotta be
I don't
less
remember.
than 40,000,
It is
isn't it?
probably, no, I don't know, I'll look it up.
Is it narrow? Yeah, I've never been on the site, but,
It's-
I mean, it's
it's-
long when you drive by.
It doesn't, there's nothing in back of it, that's for sure, it goes right up
Yeah.
to the edge of the back. Well, you know what, why don't we keep moving on that and we can
Yeah.
come back to this one?
Well, warehousing as accessory to manufacturing and other uses.
It really depends on if we're talking about warehouse, yeah, as your primary use or too. Right. Which we didn't get to the end of the regulations where we define the warehouse very specifically, and that might be where you wanna look at.
Okay.
I guess a quick comment before we move on. Analyzing that, any of these numbers, either 500 or 750 feet from the next paragraph below, when we say residential zone, I know we're referring to all residential zones. Would it be possible to say, referring to all residential zones, not counting like rural residential, for example? So if we wanted to find someone to get the Mestec building, have someone take it and not have these regulations be in the way, is it possible to do that? Or are we supposed to just say, just residential? Because as we know, when it comes to moratoriums, we don't wanna be discriminatory and focusing on one type of use.
Yeah, I think you would be a little, to call out just residential would be a little bit ununiform. You wanna be more uniform in your regulations, so I
Okay,
think
so
you
we
would
just
have to
wanna
apply
be
it, yeah.
like a blanket term of
Yeah.
just residential.
Especially
Okay.
the way our zoning is, it's not, if there was a good rhyme or reason and you could pull it out and it made sense, I would say we might have a way to go about it, but it doesn't make sense in our zone. Because rural residential in A30 versus A40, it's somewhat haphazard on where they're laid out up against industrial areas. It's not just one zone type. You got a lot of A40 over here, you got A20 down here, you got RR here, so it's really kind of all over the place.
Okay, we were talking about the uses and stuff. What if, hypothetically, would it be spot zoning if they were to purchase this and do a zone change?
No, it wouldn't be spot zoning because you'd be extending your industrial zone.
Right.
You know, maybe that's one of those ones that you do more of a use variance or you come up with some other way to handle the use if it's a unique situation.
Okay.
That might be the easier way to. Self-storage, because, just thinking of uses people have talked about for that property, self-storage, for example, what we're doing would not prohibit self-storage from going there. Might have to be a special exception, but
Yeah.
that could go there, so.
So looking at this table and trying to draw lines across, I'm not coming up with anything that applies to the last mile delivery facility.
Okay, let's just draw a line below distribution, and that's gonna jog up a little above bus. Everybody's,
I see where bus is.
Yeah.
Last mile and the
Bus and
one.
last mile are in the same paragraph there, Steve.
Oh, okay, I see.
And then freight terminals is the last.
freight terminal separate.
Okay.
So if you go over from above freight terminal and it's a slight jog up,
Mhm.
and that's,
Okay,
okay.
all right.
Michelle, we'll have to, I think, maybe hash over a little bit more language about warehouse.
Yeah, we'll
Okay.
take a look at that.
Okay. So bus, truck, and last mile, anybody have any issues with that? None. And then freight terminal, again, I think we're all set there. Should car wash be added to the list currently allowed in general commercial zones.
Is there a reason to add it to the list?
People ask me about it all the time, believe it or not. So I would like to add it for, all the ones we have are in the general commercial zone, so I'd like to add it as a use, in, say, general commercial. I didn't know if there's any other zones that you would want it in. I mean, we've said no to the Buckland Gateway Development Zone because of.
Outside
Outside
activity.
activities.
Seems to me that anywhere where you're gonna have a gas station, you should be able to have a car wash.
So probably a travel service zone, and then maybe your restricted commercial zone? What's your thoughts on that? Actually, there was one approved back where Wentworth Park went one time, down there off of, where the mobile station was, there was one approved behind it that never was built.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank God. Oh.
We can just limit to general commercial, that's, sorry, travel service.
What other zone would it possibly go in? I mean,
They have inside industrial buildings, like you take CT Transit in Hartford, they have this huge bus wash in it, but usually it's
Kind of an accessory use for
it's
their.
accessory use,
business,
but
yeah.
usually it's within the building,
Yeah.
sometimes they are separate on the site. Then up at Stanford, there's a CT Transit's got a garage down there and they have a separate building for the bus wash. But that's just something to be cognizant about.
Your freight
Quite
terminals are
large.
gonna have washing, right?
I'm sorry?
Your freight terminals are gonna have it too, right?
Yeah, usually they're within the building, if you park
Yeah, that gets
inside.
discussed with WPCA usually with whether or not you're
But
washing.
you're gonna see something come through here at some point, like a pop-out vehicle wash building. That's ancillary to this
Well, we had,
distribution center, you're gonna see
remember we
those.
had that over on McGuire Road, he did a truck wash or, remember a facility there? He's no longer there at the corner, I think it was called.
Hartford Truck.
Yeah, but it was a business that was just north of it, I can't think what it was called. He had South
behind
Satellite and then he moved over there and he did a truck wash. It's kind of a self-contained unit.
Yeah, there's a lot of water storage now and recycling and things that go with them now, they're much more complex than they were 20 years ago.
Well, I can see more of an accessory use in our industrial zone
Right.
for the businesses
Exactly.
versus a,
Yeah.
primary retail use in the commercial zones.
I don't know, they're going probably a bad path here, but what happens too with these things, especially if it's an accessory building, they may farm it out to the other businesses on the road to wash their trucks and make a profit off of it, but this is something that we'd have to deal with.
Okay, so unless I hear differently, I guess car wash allowed in GC zones
And travel service zone.
and travel service.
And then do you want me to put a caveat under additional provisions allowed as accessory use in industrial zones?
I think it's necessary.
Yeah.
So we'll call
that's-
it car/truck wash.
Okay.
It is a fleet wash. You know, it's a
Okay.
thing.
Okay, so
Car, bus, truck.
Yeah. Automotive wash.
I think that completes page 9. We'll move on to 10.
There's one comment I saw, it was in green on page 9 about small businesses, is there any other information on that, or this seems like a bold comment?
Well, small businesses, technically, that term can be used up to 500 employees, can be a small business. Under 500 employees.
Okay.
Don't we cover that with the 40,000 square feet thing?
Yeah, I think that the context was that some towns allow certain uses just as permitted. You don't go to the site plan
Okay.
approval process.
Just seemed like a,
We've never had
contentious
that,
comment, so
that,
raise it up.
kind of process here. You've always required a minimum of a site plan for commercial uses.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, page 10. Good. Okay, Michelle, 415B, they do not conflict. Delivery areas must be located so they do not conflict with normal operations, correct?
Yeah,
So operations should not have been struck through.
correct. Thank you.
C, I think we just maybe added a C there, or,
We rearranged some traffic, some of the language here. Jeff Doolittle rearranged a little bit of it. That's what he did.
okay. Drive-throughs, 15 vehicles. E, to provide safe flow for the public and eliminate conflicts on site and inbound and outbound traffic to and from the site, the applicant must adhere to ASH2 turning ratios of the,
It should be turning radii.
Radii, it should be radii.
well, that's what I was thinking, but,
I think there was a comment that now all the trucks are WB 67, so we gotta be careful that we don't just allow WB 62 turning radii.
yeah,
This was, came from the public, this.
Yeah.
yeah, yep.
Yep.
Okay, so any issues with adding that? That was, like, Michelle said, it came from the public, so. And then the green below that is a comment, public concern with additional regulations of traffic study. And as Michelle said during the public, hearing, traffic studies are not always required. Other than that, is there any issues anyone would like to bring forward that we should on page 10?
Just on the comment that you just made, a year ago when we discussed the moratorium, I did make a comment that I would like to see, or at least encourage more traffic studies for a lot of our applications. So I mean, if we can find a way to somehow put in the regulations to, I'm not gonna say mandate, but within our regulations, if you fit certain criteria, to do traffic studies. Cause as you said, not every application or not everything would require that. So I'm not sure if we'd wanna expand it.
And just to go a little further on that, Michelle, sometimes a traffic study might come in and it shows this intersection and this intersection, but this intersection over here probably should have also been considered.
So what happens with traffic studies when they come in is they get reviewed by police and engineering and planning staff. I mean, they usually, as you've heard many times, the traffic engineer explains their methodology. It's pretty standard that they use. We try to, based on our knowledge of the town, if we feel further intersections need to be looked at, we usually generally will tell them at the staff level. I mean, certainly if you have particular concerns with intersections and you have expressed it, you've had them go back and look at them further. You know, the one comment I will say about traffic studies is, you know, when a use is allowed as of right and it's, you know, it's a retail store going in and allowed as of right, it really would be onerous to require them to do a traffic study. So I mean, we try to strike a balance as to when one is required versus when it's not. Certainly special exception uses, traffic is one of the criteria that you're evaluating it on. A lot of special exception uses will need some kind of traffic statement or some type of traffic study. But, you know, I just go back in the 90s, this commission denied a subdivision application, and it was denied because of traffic. And the court ruled that if you have your property zoned a certain way, you're telling developers that they can accommodate the traffic you have it zoned for. And it was just something, you know, doesn't apply that traffic can't be looked at, but if you've got property zoned to be used industrially and someone comes in with a permitted as of right use, you know, traffic, you know, shouldn't be a big issue with that, you know.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if we think it is, then we should be looking at it as a special exception use or something else like that. I guess I just don't want to require traffic studies just for the sake of requiring them, is my point.
Could the traffic studies be used for, say, like you got the wrong vehicles going down the wrong roads? Like i.e. tractor trailers coming rumbling down Corybrook Drive?
Well, unfortunately, as we've learned, you can't control truck traffic. You can't prohibit
can't.
it from roads and things like that. I think some of what we're doing with this regulation, when it is coming, is we're looking for a truck traffic pattern to be submitted. So we're asking the developer to tell
Right.
us up front what is the truck
Yep.
routing gonna be?
Yep.
And if it is a special exception, you could condition it on the truck routing that was presented to the commission. So there are some ways that we can try to get at some of those traffic impacts.
It worked for Costco, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, and when it doesn't, and it's an approval condition, we at least have some enforceability, or in theory, we do.
Well, I
So-
think one thing you're saying is, if it's just a site plan, there shouldn't be any traffic studies for site plans.
Well, except for, I say that, and yet, like, when you're doing 100,000 square foot, distribution facility, we were requiring traffic studies, the state requires them, so I mean,
Yeah, right,
there are
right.
times where if state roads are involved and things like that, the traffic studies are warranted, even like, Phil Tarsinis has had to have a traffic study for that small project, so it's not that they're, but if it's a 3,000 square foot manufacturing facility
That's
on
it.
Nutmeg Road or something like that,
So I'm thinking more like, if you can use like a left turn signal, cause now you have more traffic going a certain way.
well, you
That's
also
more of
have.
a state application type
Right.
of thing.
You also have access management requirements that say that, you have to have certain access management patterns established with your development. And if you don't, through a traffic study, you can, demonstrate other things. So there's different ways that traffic studies get required and utilized through your regulations.
If you look at like the educational play,
Take care, yeah.
we got, I think, 3 traffic studies handed up the court like that better than the opinion of some of us. Now, I guess I'm wondering, what in our regulations would require a traffic study for a site like that?
Under your special exception criteria, one of the things is traffic impacts. Right, so you have to demonstrate through your application, you're not creating
Right,
any negative
right.
traffic impacts. So, again, as you've heard traffic engineers tell you, certain types of uses, there's formulas as to, square footage is gonna generate so much traffic per hour, so the industry standards get applied to sites. And then they, take the traffic on the site and fill it in to see, if you're gonna have problems or
So
whatnot.
based on that table that you just described, could we say that a traffic study is required for a site that will generate X number of or more trips per day according to that table?
Sure.
I mean, to me, I'm trying to draw a
Yeah, you
line
could, yep.
between.
You could come up with some factor that, a threshold. I wouldn't wanna come up with one tonight for you, but I mean, it's certainly something that we could, take a look at that traffic section and come up with some more robust
On the other hand,
requirements.
if Pride comes in and want to build a gas station on Route 5, did we require a traffic study for them?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Anytime you're involving a state road, where you're
they
gonna need state
require-
curb cuts and things like that, whether or not you're gonna need turning lanes
Yeah.
or you're,
Changes the signaling patterns.
see, yeah, all that triggers traffic studies, yes.
Speaking of which, I gotta contact DOT. When you take a left to go by the police station, the road's not working anymore. They changed the signal last fall. It's making me nuts.
It's not at the end?
It's at the end.
When you're on Sullivan Avenue, coming say from Dairy Queen,
It's at
you're gonna
the
take a
end.
left by the police station.
Yeah, I think it's at the
Yeah.
end.
It never gives you a
Turns
left turn
green.
signal.
No, it does.
And
It get,
It
you
gi-
have
it
to
gives
wait
it
till
to
the
you
end.
at the end.
Stop.
No,
It does?
yeah,
See, I haven't sat there that long.
yeah.
I take a chance to go between
If
cars.
there are that many cars coming toward you, and you haven't had a chance to take that left, it will eventually give you the green
So they
arrow.
flipped it. Used to be at the beginning.
I
It's on the
know,
other end.
there's a sign. Open up your eyes.
Here we go.
Wow.
Mr. DOT.
Well, I'm
It's
glad
looking
you
up Prado
explained
now.
that because it ticks me off too.
Yeah, well, I drive that way every day, so.
I
Yeah,
wanted
I'm
to
down there like once a month, but yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to add on to what Commissioner Wagner said. I mean, I definitely do support that. I think going within the provisions for, I think you said for special exception and seeing how we can at least expand traffic studies. And like you mentioned before, truck patterns, that's what I also meant in terms of a traffic study. Because I think it's important, because a lot of our industrial zones are at least off of Route 5 or near Route 5, which obviously has a lot of traffic. I think at least expanding the use of these throughout a lot of our zones through that, I think is very important. And I mention that because even though, how do I put it? When we had this moratorium a year ago, through my written testimony that I had a year ago, I examined a town in Colton, California, and they sort of had the same thing. A lot of their industrial zones was off of one of their big highways that went through the town. And I know, different communities, different regulations, but after analyzing them, it greatly benefited their community. So that's why I really do hope that we can at least go with this. So that's why I bring it up.
The only thing is, I don't think we should, requiring a traffic study is a cost. It's a big cost for an applicant.
It takes time.
And if there's nothing we can do about the results of that study, then why are we requiring the study? So we need to kind of, like, if it's just a site plan and no state requirement, a state requirement, okay, fine. But if we've got to approve it based on our site plan regulation, and we shouldn't require a traffic study because we can't use it to do anything. It ought to be something that helps us decide.
Well, the traffic study is just based on previous situations we've been in. They neither help us to approve or reject the application. If I'm wrong, tell me.
Yeah.
We've had a situation where one thing, the lawyers got involved and all that, and the traffic study didn't mean anything. And we based a decision based on it, and we basically lost our decision. This goes back 4 or 5 years ago.
But the
So in other
educational
words,
plays.
this traffic study that they've submitted was basically meaningless based on our decision-making, because we couldn't use it.
Well, it didn't support what the majority of people felt.
Right, so it's an extra cost, an extra burden, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
But yet, it doesn't influence our decision-making, because we can't use it in that regard.
Well, I wouldn't say that. It's an important thing to have done at the time of an application, because there's town roads that get impacted by developments too. So unless you start evaluating roads and know whether or not you need a new turn lane or things like that because of capacities. Buckland Road is a town road. That thing's constantly getting looked at and changed as a result of traffic studies, as development growth happens and our numbers change. So there is a value to them, and they do result in change. Sometimes the development proposal has to do a traffic change to make the proposal work, and that comes in as part of the application. So, those are all driven a lot of times by the traffic analysis that's done for projects.
So even though it's just a site plan, we might say, well, in order for you to work here, you've got to add a left turn lane, like the
Because
little
of-
shopping area right there at the edge of town.
The capacity's gotten, so, yeah.
So what's our criterion for having a traffic study?
So, what I wanna do with this, let me work on this a little bit, and, I really wanna get Jeff Doolittle's input into it. There's a document I can think of we have back there that talks about traffic studies, and so maybe we can, sometimes we take a traffic statement as opposed to a study.
Oh, I
which
see
is-
what you're saying, yeah.
Which is more of a, kind of a documentation of the square footage, and based on, it's not an analysis of the surrounding area, it's more like an impact of this project.
Sorry,
So sometimes, so there's sometimes it will take that as opposed to a study when it's a site plan that's, small industrial use or whatever.
supporting
So
information.
maybe we wanna get some criteria that
Now,
spells it out.
the state requires traffic studies if you have, about, say, Sullivan Avenue, because it's Route 194. The state would require a traffic study. Now, say your project is on a side road off of 194, and you're approaching that traffic light on 194, do you still need a traffic study? Is it still required? Because you spill onto that main roadway. Would the town be required to
Again, it
have
would
one?
depend on the scope of the project, to be honest with you, the size of the project you're talking about.
Okay.
Cause the state, you need OSTA if it's over 200,000 or 200 parking spaces or 100,000 square feet. That's gonna kick in a different kind of state approval, even if it's not on a state road, so. Any road, yeah, that would require it, so. And let me, work a little bit on the traffic section on when it's required versus not.
Okay, and page 11. I don't think there was any issues until we got to section 4.5, industrial zone. Purpose and intent, public had asked to keep and intent. Or it was confusing. Michelle, you remember?
Yeah, because of the small and the large, we were referencing small scale stuff and, while we were talking about distribution facilities. So I just tried to add some language to try to
Yeah,
soften it, make it less confusing. I'm not sure.
well, it's well written, there's a lot in there, but I do like that last sentence though, of adding by which by design are compatible with the budding zones and uses. I mean, that's such a clear statement.
And
I'm lost.
The crossed out paragraph, the last phrase.
yeah, there was some testimony from the public that they wanted to keep that and which by design are compatible with the budding zones and
It
uses.
says a lot, that sentence right there.
And
So you would take that "and which" and add it to that gray sentence that ends in the word facilities, so service industries and distribution facilities and which by design are compatible with the budding zones and uses.
That's where I would add it.
Yeah.
okay. Okay, so that completes page 11. We'll move on to 12. Outdoor storage, the highlighted is changes, Michelle?
Yeah, so I think, Steve, you had questioned how this would work for Home Depot, and I think I'd misstated at the time. So Home Depot has its own set of outdoor storage rules in the R 291 zone.
291.
So this,
I'm using that as an example of
yeah,
a
I think I
facility.
copied some of the 291 wording into this area here. And so I add confined to rear and side yards. I think that came out of conversation at the public hearing.
Yep.
Only in relationship to the building front?
So in other words, you weren't talking about, you were, the front of the building, the sides and the rear, you weren't talking about in front of the building. You didn't want anything in front of the building to be stored. So it's not really a front yard setback.
Okay.
It would be in front
Yep.
of the building.
That sounds clear to me, but.
Okay. What does restriction side and yard, rear yard mean? Is that,
I think that covers all the
okay,
comments there.
okay. Good. Yeah, okay. So we're on to page 13. We have town ordinance.
I gotta fill that number and I'll have to find it.
Okay, that is an actual, yep,
So that yellow highlighted thing really goes beyond both the state and town ordinance. And we're actually expanding, so we may get sued over that, but that's my idea anyway. In other words, you run trucks around in the parking lot, the noise limits apply even though they're moving vehicles. The regulation exempts a vehicle that's moving until you shut the engine off.
Yeah.
Which is like, why bother? So we're kind of adding that.
run that one by legal.
Okay, but if you recall, when we sat with the town attorney, he said you could put restrictive requirements in your regulations.
Okay.
But I'll be glad to do that, but yeah.
Just so we're comfortable with it, please. Okay. concerns the regulations don't go far enough to address noise, light, and diesel pollution associated with warehouses.
Yeah.
Does that need to go into the special exception criteria?
Well, this is a comment,
Yeah, I know,
not,
but is that, where would we,
how would we correct that? Or,
Or address it, yeah.
I know, that's a really, that's a weighted comment, and certainly, how do you control noise, like I heard people squawk about, like the Home Depot, especially in the winter time, when they drop pallets and outside, the noise just rattles out for a mile. And I've heard that from quite a few people. How do you control or mitigate that on these sites?
you
I mean,
have,
haven't we controlled and mitigated it by saying 500 feet, 700 feet, whatever? That's our control.
I hear you, but once the leaves are out, Home Depot isn't so bad, but once they fall in October, it becomes an issue right up until now.
Sure.
It's more of a seasonal thing, but I know people live down that way, and that's been one of the big concerns. They're pretty loud there.
Those are open in the summer, so it kind of reverses, you know?
Yeah, and that freight facility on, was it on Strong Road? I was way over on Main Street doing campaigning, and you could hear them dropping something every few minutes, you know, I think it was a truck connecting or disconnecting, but I don't know how you control it in a zoning regulation.
yeah,
If you're gonna have a warehouse, you're gonna have this.
Right, the noises come with it.
You're gonna have noise, you're gonna have diesel pollution. So unless we say there aren't gonna be any warehouses,
Or nothing happening at night, you know what I mean? Control hours.
but they all operate 24/7, you know?
Right.
That's what they want, yeah.
some of that, like the diesel pollution and possibly going to electric trucks and stuff like Amazon has been moving towards. It's gonna take time, it's gonna take, you know,
That's
a
a- that's a-
decade or two.
That's a generation away almost, yeah.
Yeah, yep,
We did.
And
let's,
I was looking at illumination too, well, I'll get ahead of myself.
no,
Overnight hours at the close of business, but you get these 24/7 places where they should reduce the lighting, at least the spread of it.
But that we've been able to work with, I think, the lighting. Other than the headlights of the vehicles.
Yeah, that's a good point.
except for all the businesses that, after they get their approval, they come in, have
Do whatever they want.
other lights added. Like, there's the Chem place.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
And, you know, we
Eversource won't do
approved
it
the
anymore,
lighting
though.
plan and then they
Right.
come in,
They won't give you
and
that lighting.
6 months later, and
they put up additional lighting.
Oh, that's a good
Eversource, we
point.
used to do it along Route 5 quite a bit, but they won't do it anymore. Someone told me recently they requested and they couldn't get it, so they've stopped doing the spotlights. Which is good for us, because, but when we do notice them, we do enforcement on them, so if you see some that are blinding people, let us know.
Smash and grab.
I'll start a list.
Okay.
Okay.
yeah.
In gray here, Michelle, the reduction of
Yeah.
light.
Oh, yeah, that was, I think someone brought up at the public hearing, they didn't think nighttime hours was appropriate, so we put, or I put overnight hours after the close of business.
Right, okay.
Again, if you're dealing with a 24/7 warehouse, that's not gonna work.
Right.
Well, it's encouraged and it can be required as part of special exception approval, so I mean, that's.
Yeah, you open
just-
yourself up to.
Yeah, you just let them know.
But they don't close the business, so
Right,
we
so,
can't require it. Do we wanna change it that we can require it? I mean, I
Maybe.
guess they shouldn't be putting more lighting on than they need. And other than close a business, if they're in business, then they have the lighting they need. to operate the business, I mean, if they're open 24/7. I mean, if they could reduce the lighting at 2 AM and they're still operating the business, then why do they need that lighting at 10 PM? Yeah, so, I don't know.
I know there's like a lighting contractor, the schools use it, and when we went through the school process, like Eli Terry, his house is along the back, and when it gets dark, the lights on the building actually dim at sunset. But as part of the LED, you can control it through module, they control your lighting that way, and it's programmable. But I know these days, they require dark sky lighting compliance anyway, so they should shine down and not out. So the spread shouldn't be as invasive as they were 10 years ago.
I mean, I think that's really how you control it. And then we ask them to dim when they're not open.
How about if we just say, Steve, reduction of light during overnight hours and/or after the close of business is encouraged?
Yeah.
Because that way we're talking about not just the business being closed, but just overnight hours.
Okay.
Okay, but I guess, again, the logic question I have is, you don't turn the lights on until it's overnight, right?
Right, but if they're going 24 hours, that means they have different shifts. If they have different shifts, the majority of their employees might not be on the extreme overnight, and they could back off a row of
Take
lights
your,
or whatever.
half your
You-
parking
you
lot
can.
offline or something.
Yeah.
I know, like, I hate to go down another path, but like the AIA puts out a document, AIA graphic standards, and they have the lighting levels for different workplaces through OSHA and all that, but also for like emergency and egress and sight lighting and security. There's known levels.
Yeah, we have them in our
Like
regulations.
1 foot candles used for emergency lighting. It's basically moonlight, and you just find your way out. They use it at train stations and all that. So, in other words, a lot of what they do in these areas are excessive. And if you designed it to the AIA minimum standards, I think everybody would be happy.
Do we wanna mention that standard in the?
You currently have in the back of your regulations a chart, which is the illuminating standards that there are there. So for like a low-level parking lot, it's a 2-foot candle for something like that. Medium, it's 3 to 5, and then high is, so we do have them currently spelled
Yeah.
out in our regulations as recommendations for levels.
Personally, I'm happy with the words that you have in gray here, but someone was suggesting a different version.
I just was gonna add an and/or so that it covered, overnight hours either being going on or closing business, just to give you a little more flexibility requiring.
And I'm good with that change. I don't know if anybody else has any.
That makes sense.
Okay.
So the next one, I just wanted to make a note. Someone had mentioned during the public hearing that the town should take care of natural database diversity issues on sites. And, those are private sites and they come up as they go through the development process. The town has assisted, as people know of our beetle farm that we have in different locations. So I don't think it's the town's responsibility. I mean, the town has, through its economic development efforts, assisted developers with these issues. So
In
I
the
just wanted
past,
to-
yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out to the commission that that's how it's been handled in the past, when these issues do come up and if there's opportunity.
And assisting, like with the Beatles, I think the town provided them a place to relocate the Beatles. But from what we've heard from the state, there will be no more relocating of Beatles.
I'm not aware of that.
That's,
Did Jeff tell you that?
that was in one of the reports, that they're not willing to do that anymore. That was, I think, a Folger report.
Okay.
I think the grubs are eating my lawn.
You're on your own, pal.
You wanna relocate your grubs?
You want my moles, delete them.
And the last comment on that page, monetary penalties should be considered for violation of performance standards. We had talked about maybe having more zoning penalties, but I think that would be another
whole nother.
conversation in the future, not necessarily on
This
this.
part of it.
So I'll move on to page 14. And we added a website, which it was pointed out that they do change over the years, so we might have to look at that once a year or whatever and update it. Public comment, don't always fence detention basins. We don't always fence them, but if they're in certain areas and a fence is put in, it's required that it's decorative.
Yeah, we have fencing standards, right, no barbed wire and heights and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, stay away from that barbed wire tonight.
As long as Kevin Foley's comment, no barbed wire.
No, I'm a big no barbed wire,
No,
but
same here,
anyways,
it's gotta
yeah.
look nice.
On 10, we cleaned up the language a little. I'm sorry, I don't know why I said 10, it's an H. H. For all you out there. Natural state as well as landscaping areas. Anybody have any issues with that? Looks good to me. Ensure, there was a word change there, not a big deal. Okay, move on to page 15. Used to say up to 5 years, an additional 2 to 3 years, or our draft, I think, was up to 5 years. But we backed it down to 2 to 3 years. And the ZEO always has the ability, if a plan has changed and they've eliminated some trees or a bunch of trees died, the ZEO has the ability to go in there and have them return it to the approved. But, you know, that would be on a case-by-case basis. It's not something that they typically go out and follow every month or week or whatever, you know. Okay, on 6.2.3, it was, site was spelt incorrectly, that's why it's in yellow, it's been corrected. Then we're moving down to the bottom of the page, the plantings. This conflict between, or the supposed conflict between 6.2.4 and 6.4.6. Actually, 6.2.4 is parking lot trees and 6.4.6 is buffer size trees. So they're different instances.
So we can
But-
ignore that.
Yeah, but there was quite a bit of comment about the size of the buffer trees that were being suggested. So in B there, where you're talking about going up to a 16-foot versus a 10-foot high tree, you did have some public comment about the size of these trees.
They were very expensive, the big ones.
So the paragraph B, for example, is what they were referring to. So you went from a 5 to 8 foot, you went from a 2 to 3 inch caliper, and 10 to 16 foot. So those would be changes that if you were so inclined to listen to public comment, you might look at those. We do say those. These were the buffer plantings, these.
Put them back to,
And not necessarily on a berm.
No, they may or may not be on a berm depending on how the buffer was designed, correct? But one of the things we're doing with this draft that we haven't done in the past is buffer requirements, bonding were never held to the length of time that we're suggesting holding them, so that if, you know, the idea of a buffer is that you plant it early and over time it grows in before you release it, so by planting smaller things and you're holding it longer, in theory, you're getting it established longer.
Well, the public comment was, probably from Peter DeMalley, that these are very expensive at the size where it's a burden. I guess I don't have a feeling for how much of a burden. Is it a application killer? I mean, you know, people gonna go to another town because of this, or are they gonna put up with it? I mean, it's obviously better, the stronger the planting, as long as you can make them grow, the better, but.
And the number that's crossed out is our current size?
Correct.
Mhm.
Wasn't, Peter might have said something, but it was somebody else. that,
Yeah, it was the gentleman who was a contractor who works in town.
The big tall guy?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Jim Aldridge, maybe.
yeah.
Oh, I know, younger.
I thought it was Aldrich.
Was it Aldrich?
Yeah.
I remember the 16 one being the more.
People
consistent,
bring it up.
yeah.
How about if we do half the difference?
Keep the others, reduce the 16 back to a 10, is that what you're saying?
So,
What's that, Michelle?
No, just, you know,
Half.
don't do them quite as large as we're doing,
yeah,
but find it in between
raise them, but
number.
not that much.
12 feet.
Yeah, I don't know if there's an in-between, is there?
Yeah.
Well, in between 5 and 8 is 6.5. I'm just
Or
being facetious.
What if half of a particular kind are the old dimension and half are the new dimension? Is that,
You know, I think, you know, what we're trying to do with the buffer is give people some flexibility in how they design a buffer too, so, I don't wanna get so caught up on the sizes so much as the different ideas of types of buffers people could look at doing, whether they're doing berms with some walls and, you know, different kinds of things, so I don't wanna.
It's too bad Kevin isn't here.
I was
'cause
just gonna
think-
say, we're
Yeah.
full.
You know, why don't I draft something and we'll have Kevin weigh in on it, we'll make him come the next meeting.
okay, sounds good, thank you. Okay, so, I'm just gonna put a circle next to that. More to come. And we're moving right along. Screening requirements. Okay,
16,
that's-
Not doing bad, 16 pages, 2 hours. It's a 36-page document, just saying.
Yeah, we've got some more, but let's see how far we can get if we're good with that, right? Okay, on, page 16, 4D, we just removed propose.
Cause we adopted it, so.
Okay. So that whole thing just,
At the time, we hadn't adopted that regulation, so now that we have.
right, okay. As part of our residential. Yep. Okay, so down on 9, suggested add provisions similar to Buckland Gateway Zone. Prohibits overnight operation of noise generating activities like loading, track removal, and truck operations for properties that abut residential zones.
What's the context of this section?
So talking about buffers, design of buffers.
Okay, so, I mean, we can't do that to a warehouse, a 24/7 warehouse. That's my context question.
That might already be in operation, for sure.
Well, even if we approve one, 3 years from now, we can't tell them they can't have noise generating activities like loading, truck operations, if they're gonna be a warehouse,
They're gonna be able to comply with our noise ordinance is what they have to be able to do.
yeah.
Right.
I mean, this is kind of similar to what we talked about, remember when Costco wanted to change the regulations for their nighttime activities, the noise ordinance kind of prevailed on anybody's activities. It's the things like the dumpsters that you can't really control being picked up and dumped. noises.
Well, the particular business can regulate that,
That's true.
but is there any way for us to mandate that?
I think you'd have to do it through an approval process, like a special exception approval process or something like that. I don't think you can put in a regulation right now that says dumpsters can't be picked up between 12 and 5 a.m. or something like
Right.
that.
So that, okay.
Town council could do that.
By ordinance or something like
Yeah.
that, if they're, sure.
Then you have to look at the cost of it too, because I mean, you couldn't have businesses incurring costs because now they have to.
Some businesses, I would dare say, you couldn't get to their dumpster when they're operating.
Okay.
Sometimes they're parked near their dumpster, in front of their dumpsters. I'm sure nighttime delivery, pick up at dumpsters is much easier for
Yeah,
getting in and out of places quickly. Which in your industrial zone is fine. It's when it's up against your residential zone that it's problematic.
okay, so I'm not seeing any or hearing any suggestions that, of anything that could help improve that bullet. Okay, I'll move on. Page 17,
We have a little bit about, at the bottom of 16,
what the,
C6-1 and 2, 624C1.
Yeah, that was just a mistake on my part. I didn't add two, so I had to add the two in there.
okay. Okay,
Oh, here's a big one.
yeah, 17 here. Talking about the buffer, public comment, 75-foot buffer will reduce property values and add costs to the projects. The applicant would always have the opportunity to use the 50-foot upgraded or upscale buffer rather than going to 75-foot. But that,
Going back to the bottom of page 16, that's what we're doing.
right. Exactly,
Because we're not changing any of the others.
No, none of the others are changing. All the others are the same.
yep. So, did anybody have any comments one way or another on that?
What,
On all of
what are the
them?
things they can do in court? What's this 624C1 and 2 do?
You have that handy, Michelle?
I just, I'm getting the six, but I forgot to-
Where are we? 624C, was it?
Yeah, let me switch this.
624C1 and 2. I think we left off the,
Did I give the wrong reference there?
Is it at the bottom of 17?
Oh,
it's hard to say,
That's
it
maybe
was,
one,
it was
two.
left off there, I believe.
Just give me 1 second. Let me follow the
Yep.
chain here.
Yeah, in an industrial zone, pre-existing lots developed prior to blah, 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 can maintain the 50.
And that's the chart is 4A.
Let's do 48.
That might be later
Why
on.
don't you, so wait a minute, what can't you follow? I followed it. So the reference in the chart there, 75 feet or 624C1 and 2. If you go to page 17, the 1 and 2 are at the bottom of page 17.
Okay, there's just not a 6 point,
Well, it's there, you lost it in the chain. It's C,
Yeah,
2,
page
4.
15, there's,
Yeah, C1 and 2, yeah, I'll correct the reference in there, but it's what's at the bottom of page 17, those are the 1 and 2 references.
okay.
I'll review this reference.
Cause we are looking at C already.
Yeah,
It's more
you're
than
right,
two.
so I got correct the number now.
So now, the old 624C1 and 2 in the existing regulations, was right before that table on page 7, right after the table on page 17.
Yeah.
Had a lot of words, and now we've shortened it a lot.
Yeah, we did a lot of changes throughout the whole buffer section there.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So the idea was that if you had a 75-foot buffer requirement, you could reduce it down to 50.
Mhm.
And what we did is we referenced the performance standards that are in the appendix as to the types of buffer different types of buffer you could try to design.
Mhm.
And choose one of those to design to reduce it down to the 50 feet.
Okay.
Or the other thing we're trying to do is protect those lots that are on file currently. The best ones that I can think of is South Satellite Road that are current industrial lots on file that have a 50-foot buffer requirement on the land records currently. That's what C1 did, and then the 2 was the other part.
Okay.
Right, and if they've already been built, they
That's to
more
protect ones that are
likely
built too.
exceed the performance standards because they've already grown, correct?
Well, unfortunately, so many of our buffers have died. They've grown and died off, and you know, new people bought that don't even know they have a buffer requirement. That's what we're starting to run into now. Is second, third generation owners of property, buffers that were established back in the '80s are no longer existing. New neighbors are moving in, and we're getting complaints about buffers that aren't established. So we're having to reestablish some buffers, and particularly in the area on Satellite. Those are all old areas that had old pines that have gone. So, but those areas there have 50-foot buffers that were established by their site plan approvals, and they would be protected to remain as a 50-foot buffer in this regulation.
And that would eliminate having all these non-conforming
Yeah, they would not
lots, too.
become non-conforming by this regulation,
I think
yeah.
that's,
Yeah, we're putting in a
Important.
date.
Yeah.
I think
We're
that's
putting in
good.
a date to make sure that we
Alright.
cover that, yeah.
Just like in your residential
Right,
development.
you
some
don't
of the
wanna create
ones
everything non-conforming.
Predating, so, yeah, okay.
But if they've removed the buffer,
I mean,
they
we
still
have them
gotta comply
replant
with
it.
50 foot.
Yeah, we're having them replant a 50-foot
Right.
buffer.
Okay.
Now, there are buffers on the residential side of some of these boundaries, and people have cut them all down.
Yeah, and in some areas, people are reestablishing them too, now that they're becoming more educated as to the purpose of them, so. But you're right, there's some areas where it wasn't required, you only had buffer on one side, you have a lot of variation over the 70s, 80s, 90s.
But
Pre-Michelle.
Michelle, yeah.
But having them require, like industrial versus residential, and industrial it's 50 foot and residential it's 25 foot, it's really tough to, unless you have a conservation easement or something, to,
Tell a homeowner, you gotta go put a buffer in your backyard.
well, no, maintain it. All of a sudden, they don't like how it's grown, they cut it back, and they cut it back a little more, and pretty soon it's gone.
Yeah, you got nothing. But even like spruces, as they grow, the bottoms die off. Yeah, you got
That's,
Well, I think the public or the small business or whoever they are would be happy with that. At least there's an effort made.
yep.
So I agree with that one.
Should the buffer be adjusted for smaller lots? Did I skip down? Yeah, I did.
Where are you?
There was suggestion that a 10-foot easement should be granted to abutters to establish their own buffers.
I
along
wasn't a
the
big
property
fan of
line.
that one, but.
That would be all over the Wild West.
Yeah.
Somebody could want a fence for their 100 feet, and the next one could want something
And
else.
if you're residential right next to it, why would I spend money?
Yeah.
It's like, it's just getting somebody else off the hook, so you can do whatever you want over here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put a swimming pool there.
Yeah, I don't see that as being a valid option.
Yeah.
Suggestion that the buffer should be increased to 100 feet, some suggested 250 feet, if no roadway for warehouses and storage facilities. You know, I think going up to 75 feet, yeah, if we were an undeveloped town or something, great. But we're pretty fully developed here. Really, it's the new properties that it possibly will address. I think, you know, the 75 is as much as we could possibly do. If others feel differently, chime in. Nothing should be built within 200 feet of a residential property. Commissioners, any input on that?
Well, I mean, I think what you said, right, if we'll end up in court, because let's face it, if there are subdivided lots out there, industrial or commercial, then, you know, people bought them to do something with them, and they have a right to, and if we put something like 200 feet of a residential property, we could kill the whole property by the time, you know, you wouldn't have any room to build anything on, depends on how wide it is. So, I mean, this mastic, right, if we were successful in getting something to come in on those abandoned buildings along Route 5, they're close to residential properties, right? But it would benefit the town if something did come in that, you know, worked for the town as opposed to having empty buildings.
Yep.
Would it be possible to, or at least anything within 200 feet, rather than not allowing it, rather just requiring it be special exception?
I mean, we've got all these other distance requirements.
Alrighty.
Why are we adding?
I'm just trying to think of a compromise with that comment, unless we just wanna disregard it.
Well, I don't think it's that we wanna disregard it, but I think that one of the reasons we put in the 75, right, was to try and take a look at the map that we have of the town, of the properties that are available, and what was possible, and still be able to do something with the property. And one of the comments we heard loudly was special exceptions are more expensive than site plans. So if people, one of the comments made was that, you know, we wanna have small businesses. Well, then are we saying that if a small business wanted to build on one of these lots, that they should have to be 200 feet from a residential property? You know, that, you're not gonna encourage small businesses, they won't do it. We can't afford to.
Certain uses that could be built within 200 feet might not be a big impact to the neighboring residential property. So, you know, there's no cookie cutter mode that necessarily fits that. Or at least no reasonable, like if a use isn't detrimental to a property next door, why shouldn't the commercial owner be able to build it there, or the industrial owner?
I think we've tried to do what we can to protect these residences, but bottom line, I think Kevin Foley has said over and over again, you bought a house or you built a house next to an industrial zone, you gotta expect industries to be built there.
Well, and like, look at what we proved tonight, right? This Panda daycare, you know, that's not gonna generate enough noise that you'd want to force them to be 200 feet from a residential property, and they might not even be able to have that daycare there. And so that would hurt a lot of people, right? It would hurt the owner of the property, it would hurt the people who are utilizing all those 52 families or 30 families. So I think it's a balance. We had a lot of comments thrown out, and I think, you know, we documented them all, but there are some that we're not gonna be able to do things about, and there are others where we're dealing with a freight terminal or something where we put 1,000 feet in. So I think that we're doing everything that we can. to protect the residents while still encouraging a certain amount of growth within the community, which we need for the tax base.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I said a compromise, cause I'm not in favor of, blocking anything within 200 feet. That's why at least the idea was saying, what can we do to accommodate that, rather than saying, no, we can't do that, or yes, we should do that. Because I mean, I like, looking at it, like I said, I don't think 200 feet is a smart idea, because like Commissioner Foley said in previous meetings, he bought land near industrial land, and eventually that land is going to be used for that type of use. So again, I'm not sure if we can find some sort of middle ground solution to the 200-foot idea, or rather or not, we just wanna leave it how it is. That's why, ask and bring it up as a comment if we want to sort of explore it.
Yeah.
If you left it as a blanket as it is, and say like you had a small warehouse you wanted to build or an addition, could you come in and request a zoning change? And you look at the parameters of it, say the building is 18 feet high and it blends in with the scenery, could they build it closer? And you put that as in a proposal for a zoning change.
So in that situation, you're either gonna have to do a zoning text amendment
Should
to
we not
change
go
the
there?
regulations to be able to do it, or you're gonna have to go to ZBA for variance to break the zoning regulations to do what you wanna do. Regulations can always change, yes,
Right.
but it depends on, what your goals are of the regulation in the first place. I would say don't put something in that you think someone's gonna wanna come in and change. Try to find something that you think is most likely gonna stand for right now. Again,
Yeah.
Personally, I would ignore this completely because we got all these other rules.
I would too.
you've done a lot of things to
Yeah.
try to mitigate these types of things people are
Oh,
concerned
yeah.
about, so.
I do have one idea though. I'm not sure if it's possible for us to sort of implement something that any industrial application within 200 feet that we require a public hearing. I think that's the most or the farthest that we could go, and I'm not sure if it's something that we could do.
That's a special exception.
No, you can take a site plan to public hearing.
Yeah, okay.
It doesn't change the rules of the site plan.
If it's gonna have a
Public
high
interest,
impact or
yeah.
a lot of,
Public
Oh,
hearings cost a lot of money, so I mean, they cost us $300 to $500 with their advertising and whatever, so
Yeah.
I wouldn't suggest just doing it unless it was warranted, unless it was in an area where you thought there was gonna be an impact. Cause you can always vote to hold something, take something to a public hearing.
Yeah.
I mean, doesn't the
think this-
chair basically decide whether to have a public hearing anyway?
I think your regulations say that your bylaws say that the commission can take something to public
Okay.
hearing.
Okay.
I think that,
Really, it all comes down to impact,
Yeah, I'd hate to say as a blanket rule you're gonna do it, cause legal notices are very expensive and, it just doesn't make sense to have that public hearings if they're not.
Plus it's our time.
I think that we did a lot we went from 50 to 75 feet. We've taken into consideration lot size, all kinds of things. But
Buffer plantings, yeah.
But when we're talking about nothing built within 200 feet, that means if I wanted to put up a hairdressing salon, I couldn't put it up within 200 feet of a residential area. Or like that chiropractor couldn't be within 200, I mean, I think we should, we set these regulations, try and be reasonable. Anything over 40,000 feet has lots of criteria. Freight terminals, distribution centers all have lots of criteria. I think this is too broad.
as Peter Demali would say, a lot of unintended consequences.
I mean, that's why I'm spitballing ideas.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's fine.
But you have to protect yourself on the other side. You know what I'm saying? You can't reduce it to nothing and then they're gonna use a giant monstrosity
Well,
within feet of your
So,
house. I mean,
so my last
It's
idea,
already
or
75.
I was gonna say my last compromise, like looking at this, because I do wanna analyze each and every one of these, I think this is the best one, is I guess, instead of 200 feet, we could say an abutting lot that is an X amount of square feet in terms of, the size of it. So let's say, 80,000 square feet, just an example, right? And it is an abutting lot to a residential zone. I think that, and say that would require a public hearing. Unless that falls under one of our other requirements that we've already gone over tonight. I'm spitballing ideas, I'm kinda curious
Yeah.
to.
Some of that goes with the regulations as far as like site plans.
Okay.
doesn't require a public hearing. But like Michelle said, if it's high impact or it's,
I'm
there's
trying
a
to
lot
think of circumstances that would be high impact here.
Yeah,
You
You've
know,
also
public
got-
hearings, when you have a lot of public interest, for example, even if, you know, I don't think it's high impact, but I know there's a lot of public interest. I might recommend a public hearing to control the process.
Yeah.
More than,
Yeah.
too, you know, so that everybody gets a fair chance to speak. Cause a lot of towns don't allow public to speak on site plans, for example. We always
Really?
have, but some towns don't. So to me, a public hearing, especially when you have a group of folks that wanna come out and talk, helps to structure your meeting a little bit. But it
Yeah,
doesn't, you know,
some
a
good
public hearing, when
ideas.
it's required by law, adds times to your action table, like, you know, you have 65
Sure.
to take a public hearing, 30 to close it, blah, blah, blah. When you don't have a public hearing required by law, those extra timetables aren't added into your timetable, so, you know, you go to public hearing and you may be adding, it may take longer to get through the process, and you may or may not have the time to get through the process, so it may add extensions on it and things.
Okay, so I guess the recommendation is just to do it on a application by application basis of whether or not
As
we
you
want to
feel,
do it.
right.
That's what I'm thinking too, it's like you come in, say Peter came in, they had Nutmeg Road and it's a small addition on some building that's there and you're within 100 feet of some property line, low impact. 5 extra cars a day. I don't think anybody would really chase that away. But again, you have to protect the town on the other end, but I think that's what we're trying to do. For the high impact, but
okay. Was there anything else? Should the buffer be adjusted for smaller lots?
You already talked about
We
that.
talked about
Okay.
that in 1 and 2.
Okay, yep, cool.
I think there's a comment below it in the green though. I brought it up last meeting or the last time we talked about this. Adjusting the buffer requirement to go along Burnham Street, you know, on the town line on the southern end. My thought process was, even though it's not in our town, it's, you know, East Hartford, that is a residential area that is on the other side. As we, you know, affirmed earlier, we wanna treat all our let me restate. We wanna treat residential zones equally, whether or not they are ours. I think it'd be fair to put that buffer on the southern end of the town line.
it's only fair.
Do we buffer across streets?
You don't
Yeah.
buffer along the roadway, you don't
No.
require buffer along a roadway. Having said that, I can appreciate what you're saying, but I think you might be able, it's a very, Burnham Street's such an odd thing, cause Burnham Street's owned by East Hartford, so they actually control the
Okay.
curb cuts into South Windsor. But the land is owned in South Windsor on our side, so it's a very unusual situation, so East Hartford does have some control of the site plan approval process. You might provide some screening trees, you know, some landscaping along the frontage. I don't think you wanna have a buffer of a 50-foot depth or anything like that, but we can encourage landscaping along the Burnham Street frontage to, which you get anyhow with a landscape plan, but to your point, when there's residential areas across the street.
Are we speaking specifically at the top of Burnham, at King, where there might be,
I know, I mean, there's residential on both sides of Burnham, really,
Right,
on
right,
either
right,
side of
right.
Route 5, depending on where you are.
And there's commercial on
both
both sides.
It's not ideal for sure.
No,
okay.
okay,
But they do get notified, you know, folks in East Hartford do get notified, the town gets notified anytime we're doing anything on Burnham Street, so they have an opportunity to look at our plans and offer comment, so.
okay, moving right along, page 18, is pretty self-explanatory. Did anybody have any issues that they,
Yeah, the only thing I thought of was, right at the bottom, we have, in yellow, man-made barriers such as walls, fences, et cetera. I think it's a good idea, but it's just the maintenance of them. I'm a huge stickler with residential properties that put up stockade fences along the road and they put them up because they don't wanna see cars going by and then you know, looks like crap after 3 years, they don't maintain them.
Yeah.
I think it's an eyesore, but I could see other property owners doing that. Put up a fence, makes the town happy, let it go.
Well, this is about an alternative buffer, it's not about fences in front of houses.
So it'd be a regulated buffer, you
Yeah.
know, so you could, if it does go into disrepair, it could be cited and required to be,
Yeah, just the maintenance part.
the maintenance, yeah.
Okay, I appreciate your comment. But not for that section, if we come across it someplace else.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay, so on
There's a
page,
lot here, so it's good.
yep, page 19, there were some changes made to number 2, which is the minimum crown width for the, I think it was 4 feet before, Michelle, and
Yeah,
now it's
yeah,
2 to 4 feet.
Mhm.
And side slope ratio, no greater than 2 to 1 versus 3 to 1.
So what's steeper, 3 to 1 or 2 to 1?
2 to 1 steeper.
Did you say what was steeper?
Steeper.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah.
Okay.
Our landscape consultant that we talked to had suggested 3 to 1 because it was easier to maintain.
Yeah.
But there were some instances that the public, I'll say the public, felt it would be beneficial to have a steeper slope and it wouldn't hurt. We'll see how it goes in the future. But that's what we're moving forward right now is 2 to 1. And a lot of it, just to backtrack a little, with higher berms, like say a 6 or an 8 foot berm, the base of it would be a lot wider. So, you know, if we can get the higher berm, I'm willing to go to the steeper
Right.
slope.
Yep.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Okay, so down in F, be designed not to impede wildlife. I think we're all in agreement to that. 2 at the bottom, we just eliminated to maximize sightline obstruction, a screen shall be placed immediately adjacent to the feature to be screened. Any issues on that page? Ooh, page 20. Okay, we've got 4 roof-mounted equipment shall not be visible in any direction from, we removed any adjacent properties from any roads and public right-of-ways, which seems
Yeah.
fair. Okay, we get down to that yellow.
Yeah, and Steve, I have a question mark on my thing here, if there's some additional language you were looking for in that paragraph. I may have missed it.
Okay,
I guess my question to the others is, we go to a lot of trouble to require screening of all the equipment. I don't think solar panels are gonna pop above that, but how would you feel if suddenly you had this nice, what's the right word? Wall around the outside of the roof and suddenly a solar panel pops up above it, so, you know, if you don't mind, then we can take that out. If you'd rather not be able to see the solar panels.
if it's pops up, you know, just a little or something, I don't see an issue with that. So far, we usually regulate, yeah, we try to be proactive, but we regulate because we have issues. But if you don't have issues,
I mean, I can tell you, all the schools have solar panels, you can't see them.
yeah, except,
Yeah,
I think for 291, I could see some, but,
Usually the 30 degrees to 45, and I said, I've seen them on buildings when you look down off the highway, and they gotta be no higher than the table.
yeah,
I mean, it's like you're energy efficient, it's a good thing. We should see.
Yeah.
In their uniform. Not like they're
Plus, I don't know about
haphazard.
screening solar panels, what if like the sun is gonna, I don't know, do something good?
Yeah.
It's an interesting point, yeah.
I think it looked actually pretty good in the building, if I can lie.
Yeah.
Seemed neat and uniform, so.
Yeah, I mean, my reason for putting it in was just because there was so much concern by everybody about screening, so
yeah,
I'm happy to have that deleted.
okay.
So
In
take out
agreement,
the yellow
everybody?
line?
Let's take
Yep.
it out, yeah.
Take out the yellow,
Oh, the yellow, okay.
okay. And we eliminated in C, combination of 8-foot tall fence and 5-foot. Maybe provided in lieu of solid fencing,
Didn't make any, that's extra language.
yeah.
Okay.
Gone.
Gone.
Okay, we're on page 21. And this has all to do with off-street parking. There was an addition,
We should
Do you have
extend
to extend your meeting? I don't forget what time your regular meeting goes.
9:30.
You probably need to extend it, right?
I thought we did it till,
I thought we
10?
went to
Your
10.
bylaws to 10, I just, I
I
can't
think-
remember.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, you're right. We talked
Your
about
bylaws
9:30.
changed to 10,
Yeah,
I
You
apologize.
guys agreed to it,
I know.
I forget.
we're going.
I think you can blame Alan for that.
I'll happily take the blame.
We do have a fair amount to go, so
You know, I just didn't want you not to extend your
I
meeting.
appreciate that. Okay, so on 21, we just added the +1 space per employee, I believe the plus might have been left off.
Yeah.
Okay. Any issues on that page? If not, we'll move on to page
on.
20.
You did have your public comment that they thought the 50% was a large addition.
Okay, let's,
That's on
So it was
page
20%,
22.
yeah.
oh, okay, well, when we get there, well.
You'll get there.
Yep,
So I was recommending maybe at 20%.
At the very bottom line on 21,
was it?
in the manufacturing, there's a couple places, at least 2 places.
I think it applies to all
On
of them,
page
right?
21, where you see
50%.
50%,
Anywhere 50%.
so,
Um,
I mean, anything we can do to reduce parking pavement, I'm happy with.
No, I'm in full agreement. Yeah, I completely honest with parking in our town in general. I think we overpark every single application, so I think if we can lower the percentage and lower the amount of parking that we have to require, I'm in agreement.
Okay. You must ride a bike.
He feels really strongly about this.
Parkinson's deal.
okay,
We can cut bicycle parking spaces as well.
There you go, as regular cars.
my concern with shift parking was you got both shifts that are there at the same time. They're required to be there by their employer. And if you don't have enough parking, where the hell are they gonna park? But
The
if
employer can change the way they do their shifts.
it doesn't,
I mean, in defense of Alan and parking in general, these warehouses, I don't think employ as many people as we think they are.
right,
And
and,
so I think the shift might be okay, you know?
Yep.
I know we can't take the chance, but
It's for manufacturing too.
manufacturing, well, that's a little different story.
Manufacturing warehouse.
yeah. But,
Manufacturing sometimes have a parking, people some come by bus or other
Right.
reason, other
That
ways.
is true.
Yep.
That is true.
the recommendation from staff is 20%. I'm not gonna rock the boat, so I'm good with it.
Yep.
Instead of 50, it's 20.
Yep.
Perfect.
And that'll be reflected wherever it works. So, shared parking inclusive, I think that used to say exclusive before, so it was corrected to inclusive.
And the question is, do you think it should be? So in other words, this is a situation where you have a parking requirement based on its use, and then you might have truck parking as part of the facility's operations.
Mhm.
can those parking spaces count towards the use parking? Do they have to be exclusive of each other?
Commissioners?
I apologize, I'm getting my words confused. So when we're saying inclusive, what we're saying is if we thought there was 100 employees.
You need 100 parking spaces based on our formula.
Okay.
Can you do 75 of them as parking spaces and 25 as truck spaces over here?
But then what happens if you need those truck spaces?
That's what I'm saying, should they be exclusive of each other?
What do you think, Steve?
Actually, it was my suggestion to
I
put the
know.
word inclusive there, so, again, trying to cut down
Thanks,
the amount of paving on these sites.
Yeah, if it creates a conflict, which I think that example has the potential to create a conflict, I don't think you can.
So if they're exclusive, what people can do is show us reserve parking, if they feel that they don't need all the parking, right? So that's a solution right there. So if we kept them exclusive of each other.
They could be on that fancy new grass type pavement,
Right?
right?
Yeah, because especially with trucks, we don't want them not having parking spaces and then having them moving around or, because then you get into the noise and the diesel and.
Parking in
Well, I
my
mean-
backyard, you know?
Imagine a warehouse, okay, on one side of the warehouse, there's, 200 parking spaces for cars and 50 parking places for trucks. Does that count as 250 for meeting this requirement, or do we not count the truck spaces? We've never really said in the past what we meant
No,
by it.
we've never counted the truck spaces in the past. We've
But
always
the-
looked at the parking lots to meet the parking requirements.
I mean, that was our practice, not
Yeah,
what the
that's our
regulation.
practice, yeah, that's been our practice, yeah.
Um,
Practice has been pretty good, we should stick.
So putting inclusive in here would be a change in what we've been doing.
Are you willing to go exclusive?
It
It
was a
sounds a
suggestion
little,
that we think about it, so.
Yeah.
Can we get some data on that? Like, can we look at our warehouses that are operational and?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I just had someone come back with some pictures of our Mobus and our other one right down here on Sullivan Ave. And those were both heavily waived parking requirements.
Okay,
And I think we're gonna have to revisit them adding some parking on their site.
oh,
Because Mobus had the whole front parking lot, people parking parallel where there weren't spaces, creating spaces. And if you recall, Mobus had a real small parking lot in the front
Yes.
there.
yeah.
The other one, I'd have to look at the plan a little bit. So, part of what I wanted to do is look at some of the other, we did a lot of waiving of parking spaces on some of those other ones. We didn't do it for other ones, so without going out and doing some empirical site visits, I can't really tell you definitively, but that is something that we did notice fairly recently.
okay.
But then it should be exclusive. Not
Okay.
gonna work.
With some exclusive, and then we can look at sites individually as far as waiving spaces or.
Okay, moving right along. I believe we'll go on to page 23.
And I am gonna be moving that highlighted, the first highlighted yellow up to G, the last sentence of G. Did not do that in your copy, but I did in mine.
Okay. Perimeter Circulation Road, yeah, I don't think we've been successful with perimeter circulation roads in the past. A good example of a perimeter circulation road is the old J.C. Penney in Manchester.
Oh, yeah.
And the circulation road that goes around that. It's substandard at best. Even the one in FedEx, I don't think is as it was originally designed. So, I don't want to change the wording, but other than what we have changed? Is everybody in agreement with that?
So the only question I have is, does the employee parking cut into the 20 feet?
It shouldn't. We shouldn't allow it to.
Mhm.
So I think you had made the comment that it should be unobstructed, the 20 feet should be unobstructed, or, so we should somehow make sure that,
But on the other hand, I don't think it has to be at the edge of the property. It could, my concern is it's very hard to make it always be at the edge of the property, even with parking allowed for employees, It could be closer to the building and just so it goes all the way around.
We don't.
Would be my interpretation of what's required, what's needed.
so the word perimeter, is that what you're saying? Rather than saying perimeter, just say an access road around it rather than perimeter?
Circulation road.
Is that what you mean? I mean, what's getting it to the edge, I guess, is the perimeter part, right?
Well, is that how we interpret perimeter?
Like, kind of, perimeter of it's around the outside of it. I do anyhow.
Perambulated road?
I mean, we could take out perimeter and then it's just an access road.
Circulation road, I like that.
Circulation road rather than perimeter.
So Bart, were you saying that you thought we should leave it in, or do you think that we shouldn't have this in our regs?
I don't know if it's really, as far as what it's being said here, the 20-foot width, whether or not it says perimeter or circulation road, I think that's important to have the 20 feet.
Okay.
Yeah, I think circulation road's probably the right, it doesn't place it, but it's the use of it. The perimeter is really an area.
Yeah.
I think a perimeter being around the outside of it. Like, where circulation, to your point, doesn't necessarily have to be on the outside, it could be through the middle. Right.
Does anybody have any comment, or you wanna,
And you wanted to add the word unobstructed.
Unobstructed, we'll put somewhere in there too. We'll rework that word for the third time.
That's the only
Fifth
comment
time.
on the page, but-
For the 10th time, we'll rework it.
okay.
So you probably have to remove the word perimeter in the paragraph.
Yeah, that's what I've crossed that out, so.
All types of facilities should have 2 lanes in a single direction to alleviate disruptive traffic patterns.
No.
That's too prescriptive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like overkill to me. Yeah, there's some places that it could help out with issues, but I think it's asking a little bit too much. Okay, I don't think there are any other hot topics. Did anybody else have anything on 23? Otherwise, we'll move on.
Construction of parking under J, number 3.
Okay.
Some comments a month ago. But the sentence should read, all crosswalks, sidewalk access, and parking accommodations shall be in conformance with current ADA requirements, and in parentheses, there's ADAG, that's a physical part of the ADA. It's ADAAG, in parentheses, otherwise it's a giant regulation. And Connecticut General Statutes, section 14-25, or 253A. That's where the handicap parking lies in the Connecticut General Statutes. I just looked it up.
A? Gotta have an A at the end?
Yes, 14-253.
Is that a big A, a little A?
Little A.
Okay.
Little A. 14,253A, okay.
Yep.
Awesome.
But it should be current, that's a
Yeah.
key word in that whole
Yeah.
sentence.
Current.
Is that your day job?
Okay, we'll move right along. I think there was only one change on 24. Main access driveway. Added the word access.
Okay.
I don't think that's an issue for anybody. If it is, shout out. Page 25. Yeah. Okay, wider truck lanes. The trucks would cross into opposing lanes. I think that's good. J, the plan should demonstrate that two vehicles can pass in opposite
all right.
directions.
I'm still like rattled about Costco. When you come out of Costco and you take a right and you go up the hill,
That
Yeah,
curve,
if your
Right,
car is
right
longer than 5 feet, you can't make the corner.
They know that's an issue.
I'll leave it at that.
You don't go straight? Who doesn't go straight?
Nobody can fit through that
anybody who
corner.
wants to go to Aldi's.
Correct, that's
Go out the
exactly
back
it.
way then.
Then they got
The
sign
one that
says-
says no through traffic?
Exactly.
Take it a left on Sand Hill. We gotta talk.
There's many ways
I
to
go
get
through
out.
that no through traffic, I say.
Back tires hitting the curb, you know, everything over there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Good luck with that one.
Alright,
Okay, anybody have any issues with page 25,
well, the only thing is, I mean,
EV guy?
no, that's, but the one about
Okay.
demonstrate two vehicles, can pass in opposite directions, unless it's one way. You know, I mean, they could have a one-way.
Yeah, you're correct.
You throwing in a caveat there? Okay. Anything else on page 25? If not, we'll move on to 26. I see green print. Okay, public comment, we should not have interior landscaping requirements for parking lots and industrial projects.
I just question that in green there on that one.
Yeah,
If you can see it when you're driving by and you have this sea of asphalt with no breakups in it, it looks awful, all right?
Yeah.
So I've seen a lot of warehouses out there and different things, when they have these giant lots, they do have islands out there with trees and they do maintain them. The trick with snow removal is to have it so you have the length with end caps, but not have the dog bone situation where you gotta run your plow in between it. If you have it as one island without the dog bone effect, your plow's gonna go right by it.
We call it interior landscape, and we don't necessarily tell them how they have to do it, so we do a little bit, but.
Yeah, I don't see that as,
You know, if they had their way, nobody would put an island in, I'm guaranteed.
yeah, I just don't like those huge lots that are just open, it looks awful.
It's just gonna make for a nice racing track for.
yeah. Or to do donuts.
It's a very common
in
complaint,
circles, yeah.
that one there, but.
Okay, so I think we're in favor of disregarding that comment. I don't see anything else on 26, we're on 27.
It's a use,
Okay, just a little word
Word
change,
change, yeah.
yeah. From the public street, down at 3, another word change, existing industrial warehouse use facilities rather than zoned. Just cleaning it up a
We
little.
define warehouse use somewhere else,
Okay.
combines all those things together.
yeah.
Okay, we'll move on to page 28. We have public comment, this requirement should be eliminated, which is the bumpers at the docks. The building code addresses when bollards are necessary.
I know that we had to really push Costco to put bollards in at their corner there, so I would like to keep that in there. Because I think there's some times where they just try to design these things so close.
Yeah.
That we should be looking for some protections.
Keep it.
Keep it.
Not that often that we would have that requirement, so.
Okay, I think we're all in agreement for that, keep it. Drive-through canopies shall be a minimum of 10 feet in height. I think that,
Yeah, I think this was based on some comments that Jeff Doolittle gave me as well.
okay,
Fire trucks have to go under, is that the?
Yeah.
they need coffee too?
All these changes were Jeff Doolittle's suggestions.
Okay. Same thing with the loading spaces?
Yeah, the size of the spaces, yep.
Okay. Anybody have anything else on page 28? If not, we're moving right along. Page 29. It just added undeveloped lots, so trying to have a walkable community. Down with 3, multi-use paths at least 10 feet wide in width may be required along collector and arterial roads. The only issue with that is may. But like I've said numerous times, we're a fairly well-developed community, and it's tough. The communities that are putting it in have areas that they aren't half developed or three-quarter developed. But it is something that we should be working to. I'd love to have a 10-foot pathway down Sullivan Avenue so bikers can go safely up and down Sullivan Avenue.
You know, that something that could happen to make that work would be you would take or acquire an easement on the property, but that could mean that the building no longer has the proper setback. So, you know, next time we look at this, we might wanna say, you know, if we're taking land in order to build a 10-foot path where we don't have room, because that's one of.
The easement won't affect your setback. It would only affect your setback if you actually conveyed the land.
So I think if we convey the land, we may need to, if it's done for this purpose, allow that to reduce the setback the same amount.
Yeah, I think the other thing you might do if you did it by easement, you might have that not count towards an impervious coverage ratio too.
Mhm.
You know, whatever paved area doesn't take away from the impervious allowance on the lot or something. Those might be ways to make it more palatable.
So at the present time, is everyone's good with that language?
Yes.
Nay? Okay, we'll move on. Page 30.
So just one comment on the freight terminal section. So I'm gonna come up with some wording on how we're gonna do the measuring. So within each one of these definitions, it says it's measured to the zone, the property line. So just know that I'll come up with some general statement and then we'll have it carried through.
I'm gonna ask you, Michelle, like, what's typical setback on a property? I know in front of my house is probably 15 feet that the town owns as an easement,
Well, the town typically owns a 50-foot right-of-way, and if a
Owns 50.
road is 26 feet, if you go
Yeah,
to the center of the
whatever's
road,
left
you usually
over.
got 10 to 12 feet of
okay,
non-road that the town owns,
all right.
is a general rule of thumb.
Can be as much as 100 foot on Main Street.
And
gonna
Main streets
say,
are
yeah,
an
it
anomaly, and then you
varies a
take
little bit.
other streets that are really old and we own like 23 feet.
I think the state's even different too, and what they,
Yeah, Chapel Road, we own 60 feet, so I mean, there are some differences, but
What do you
for the
do on
most
a-
part, 50 foot's a good rule of thumb for a
What do you
right.
do in a cul-de-sac? Just take the very middle of the cul-de-sac and do a,
Well, no, we own the whole round cul-de-sac and we own everything around it as well.
but determining feet onto your property.
Oh, well,
Public improvement specs that,
so
school bus?
So if you're talking about like the frontage, if you need 100 feet of frontage from a lot perspective, you get to measure it at the building line. So it's a converging or diverging lot measurement, so depending on how the design is. So there is some allowance, so you don't have to have it all
yeah,
on the radius.
reason I ask, cause they have the, you know, like a walkway, if you put it in, it's within the town easement. There's really no hardship on how the building lines up.
Yeah, it just, you take Buckland Road, for example, we have like no right of way left. Everything we own there is pavement. So I mean, you have very little room for sidewalks when you have a road like that. We just don't have that much right of way, so. Every road's a little different.
Okay, warehouse use, that's really just a clarification.
At the very top of page 30, there was that comment about public right-of-way or shelters, bus shelters.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
That gray has been added, correct, Michelle?
So then
Okay.
we're allowing them to either be on the public right of way or within the site itself.
Okay. Okay, any other concerns with page 30? If not, we're on 31. There was some language removed,
Basically citing specific businesses.
yeah. And some of that were so the committee could understand a particular aspect use. Freight terminal, there was some language removed, consolidation of pallet loads, little storage duration. Lower down, changes in the use after the original commission approval may require additional approvals from this commission. Public concern, not enough distinction between a warehouse and distribution center. Definition should be made simpler. Building definitions are changing all the time, and there's a lot of crossover of uses.
That one, I don't know how to fix it.
Yeah,
And I think we did a stab at it. I mean,
Right.
this is a pretty good attempt at defining them much better than you ever had before.
Better than we
so,
had before.
yeah, I think you gotta start somewhere.
yeah, and the public does wanna know what's going in somewhere. So we made a lot of changes in that respect, and hopefully they work out for the best. How is the separating distance measured? Separation distance,
I think we discussed that earlier.
Yeah,
Rick.
that's why I'm gonna work on some wording for you.
okay, fair enough. On to page 32. C, minimizing traffic in residential areas. Yeah, going to truck route. Industrial buildings should be built to accommodate solar panels. As I said in one of the previous public hearings, the weight of the solar panels, I don't think is that much that it really affects the structural
Very little.
component of the buildings.
I had to add all kinds of supports when I put solar panels on my roof of my house,
That's residential though.
yeah.
When the buildings are built commercially, I mean, they have to have, for the northeast, they have to be able to carry snow loads,
Yeah, it is 30
monumental
pounds per square
snow
foot.
loads.
Yeah, usually live load.
I think that's fine.
Okay.
Take this out.
Maybe that's something that, they get an abatement when they do things like that. I mean, some other criteria, maybe it goes somewhere else, I guess is my point.
Yeah.
There's other ways to encourage it than through your zoning regulations.
Right.
Okay,
And I'm gonna be checking legal about the noise within the property, that's kind of reiterated again under C here. And so I have the note to check with legal about
Yep.
that.
okay, thank you. There was language removed from our draft down on the access drive.
I think it just got too wordy and it was describing something that wasn't the drive,
Okay,
right, Steve?
does anybody have anything on page 33? Not, we're moving on to 34. We've got comments under changes. Comment made, special exception conditions should be reviewed, which we talked about possibly doing in the future. Concerned that they may be some legal questions, suggests we should limit the use of special exceptions as they cost the developer more money and will require more public hearings. Any concern, questions, comments regarding that? Move forward.
Guess,
And I think under the second one, I mean, we're talking about coming up with some allowance to allow for additions so that they don't have to go through special exceptions for permitted uses. So we are gonna, I think I heard a 15% maybe, 10 to 20.
Instead of 20, yeah.
15% maybe addition or something along, I'll draft it something along those lines, we can talk about the next meeting, but, and I'll try to
Okay.
give you some examples. But
That's
I
fine.
think that goes a little bit to
Yep.
this particular concern.
10 p.m. I just saw the time flash.
You know, I'm just laughing at myself. It's like the next review we should do is like go in reverse.
Got 2 pages.
I'm thinking, it's like, this could be like the worst part of the regulation right here. I'm so
Yeah.
tired. Oh, yeah, that
Well,
sounds
I don't
good,
think
uh.
we're ever gonna do a comprehensive review like this.
No, you only
For
do
a
the
while.
green, really.
I'm only kidding, but it's.
Okay,
we need to extend the meeting.
You wanna do it by like 5-10 minutes?
Yeah.
We have 2 pages left.
10 minutes.
Alright, I motion to extend the meeting till 10:10 p.m.
Okay, we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes. Thank you all. Okay, we have page 34. That's, the bottom one is, the one that you said we're doing language,
Yeah.
Michelle?
that's what my-
Okay. Page 35, anybody have anything you want to discuss about that? If not, we'll move on to page, huh?
There's one spelling on
Where?
A4, it says plant tress versus trees.
Trees, oh.
Hey.
Oh, okay.
Trusses.
Some developer could have used that as a
Who knows?
loophole and not plant
Who knows?
trees. Good idea.
All these trusses show
We-
up.
we-
What are they?
Yes, the
All
plant
these
trusses.
Yeah.
Where are your trusses?
Thank you for
I
that.
don't think they have the right caliber.
Yeah, when they come up with that, like, where's 10 o'clock, are we doing this?
If nothing else, we'll move on to page 36. There was some language removed. Okay, we have general comments. Numerous proposed modifications to the existing regulations will impose significant costs, additions to business owners hoping to build new facilities. I think we've addressed a lot of the concerns that were voiced. If anybody has any other issues, please bring them forward. The town should delay implementing new regulations if property owner can prove that they hired a site designer to begin work prior to June 1st, 2023.
Let them go to ZBA for that.
Yeah. Okay. Too many rules for small business, suggest a feedback loop. Suggest a feedback loop for applicants, want the pros to.
Process.
Yeah.
Once the process is.
Who wrote this?
Actually, the feedback, I would love to go review, you know, we've approved things and that's the last we hear about them. But, you know, are we happy with the way Coca-Cola worked out? Are we happy with the way Home Depot worked out? Are we happy with, you know, the things we approved? We put a lot of thought into, but we could learn by.
You know, I know that they've taken a lot of pictures of various things. Maybe we'll have some meeting where we just bring in a bunch of pictures of these facilities and we can take a look at them.
Yeah.
Because I know that the guys in IT have done that, so.
I mean, I look at the school, the new school, and it's way the heck up on this mountain, and I'm thinking, I didn't visualize it that way at all.
Almost monstrosity.
The Pleasant Valley School, yes.
Larger than college campuses around the state. I mean, it's
PVU,
huge.
that's what we call it, PVU.
It's huge.
In the
And they're bringing
public
portable
hearing
classrooms
for
in.
that, I had talked about, can't you get it lower and
Yeah.
use some of that fill to build up the other areas? They were gonna do what they wanted to do. Okay, so we are on page 36. believe too many rules, small business. Concern for making existing businesses within 500 feet of residential zones non-conforming. Again, that was looked at.
We're talking about, there are two different things that I think Peter was bringing up. One is making something non-conforming, and something's making something that needs now a special exception rather than just being a permitted use.
Right.
To me, they're two different things. You know, the whole idea of non-conforming is eventually they'll go away. So you don't wanna just give a non-conforming or the ability to expand versus something that was an as of right that got turned by a special exception, that's different. It's not like it's become non-conforming, it's just the process changed by which it's reviewed. So, when something's, you know, and I go back to Aldi's, cause Aldi's makes the 500 feet cut, so it can be a distribution facility. Instead of being by special exception, if its expansion's 15% or less, it would be by site plan. That's what we're talking about, writing an allowance for, not for something that's been made non-conforming. So, and I'll give you an example, let's say Aldi's was only 200 feet away, then it would become non-conforming. Then we wouldn't want to see an expansion of that through your regulations. You know, someone can go to ZBA and prove that they have a non-conforming expansion needed or something.
Yeah.
So two different things.
Okay, any questions, comments, concerns?
Well, I think we tried to address the small business. I mean, I understand their concern, but I do think we did, that's why under the 40,000 and some other things, you know, we did try and,
Yeah, prior to a certain year,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
a date
yeah.
of the regulation.
and that's why I was pushing folks back on the 200.
And what I would suggest too on the buffer cut sheets, we can include as many or as few as we want. So maybe if people want to take a look at it and see what they think might be useful. I kind of pulled out, I think there was 6 or 8 that I thought were most useful, but we don't have to include all of these. It's really up to what you want to do.
So that's your homework to take a look at those one more time.
I guess I'm not sure how these things actually figure into, they're all very interesting, but how do they actually?
They show different samples of a 50-foot buffer and a 75-foot buffer. They're designed with the larger trees being proposed, so again, if we didn't go with those larger trees. So they're kind of a sample or a cross-section of what buffers could be designed like. We tried to give ones that elevation change, just to illustrate that not all sites are the same. You know, it's not all linear look that they're looking at.
I mean,
They don't change an awful lot, they just give you some different pictures, that's all. Different ways in which it can be set up.
Can we
honestly.
refer to them somewhere? I'm trying to.
In the buffers, the cross sections are referred to. Yeah. So what I would intend to do is to take this document now and turn it into a red line document. You know, getting rid of the green, that there was a public comment, and just highlighting the changes that we're making, trying to make it so you can see what we're doing. Does that sound?
The changes since,
That we did tonight.
Right.
Everything that we've done tonight, so it would
Yep.
kind of be a draft of a regulation,
Mhm.
not with, you kind of almost have to look at your old one and this one to compare, I won't make it a
So whatever
markup.
color you choose, it will only show what we changed tonight.
Tonight, and, you know, all the
You
things.
did as a result of a comment.
Right, like anything that you did yellow and you've accepted, it's gonna turn red. Right, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So I'll just try to highlight the new stuff for you to review, not that you can't look at other stuff again, but.
I'm just amazed at the amount of work you've had to put into this, let alone the committees.
Yeah.
So appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So my next question is, May 9th would be our next meeting. I have no applications that'll be ready to be heard that evening for various reasons. 2 of them are text amendments that are at CROG and need further review. 2 of them are industrial site plans that are in wetlands and will not be through Wetlands Commission by the 9th for our agenda. We can have this on that night. I can get a draft ready for you to have that night. Or you can have the night off and we can have a draft ready for the 25th. It's really up to you what you want to do. The 16th, you do have a meeting with your consultant on the POCD. It's going to be on the conservation topic. It'll be another meeting similar to what you had last week here. So you do have the 16th and the 23rd as set meetings for May.
I'd like to get this thing killed off.
So then just focus on the 9th and just have it.
Yeah, I mean, we ought to plan to approve this on the 9th, along with the change, with the elimination of the
Well,
moratorium, right?
That happens as a part of that approval, because the first thing you're doing is eliminating the moratorium.
looking on our calendar, the industrial flex space,
That's not gonna be ready until the end of May.
so they're gonna give us an extension on
Either
that?
that or you have 35 days from a wetlands decision. Because it's held up in wetlands right now. They're having a second night of public hearing.
Right, but
Is that Connecticut?
does that give us enough time? Oh, and that's not, we have to decide whether or not that's going to public hearing,
Right,
correct?
that's something else that you want to decide.
Um,
The Wetlands Commission had 15 people show up at their hearing. Only 4 people spoke.
yeah. I know in the past, like Alan's wanted a lot of transparency, which is fine. And I think it's good, that if there's gonna be applications, that have a lot of interest, that we do public hearings, for the applications.
So for 75 Connecticut, we can schedule a public hearing
Yeah.
for that.
Okay, so we should vote on that, sending that to public hearing. And Chair would entertain a motion to do that.
We have to extend our meeting if we're gonna have any motions.
It's just 10:10.
Make a motion to extend our meeting till 10:15 PM.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion passes. Thank you, Steve. So, do we have a motion to send those to public hearing? And seconded?
What are we sending?
75 Connecticut Boulevard, which is adjacent to
It's
the
the one that's
residential
gotta be
area.
done by 5/18.
I mean, is that the industrial flex space? Oh,
Yes.
okay, yeah, all right, yes.
I will request an extension.
Okay,
So we'll either get a 65-day extension or at least have a 35-day.
okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We gotta decide whether you want the night off.
No, I think we all
We get it
wanna
done.
get it done.
Let's get it done if we can.
Okay, good.
So I'll get you a final draft with your agenda for the 9th.
Do we have any bonds, Michelle?
No, you do not.
New business or old business? I'm
Nope.
sorry.
Old business, you took care of the Connecticut.
Okay. So if there's nothing else, a motion to adjourn would be in order.
Second.
We have motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion passes unanimously.
Guys, I
Your
wanna
job is to
apologize.
get rid of
My
3 of
phone was,
these.
my watch was ringing,
Your
not my
best
phone,
friend.
and I'll